Chapters 1 and 2 of The White Alley. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Celine Major. The White Alley by Carolyn Wells. 1. White Birches. Almost before the big motor car stopped, the girl sprang out. Lap robes flung aside, veils flying, gauntlets flapping, she was the incarnation of youth, gaiety, and modernity. "Oh, Justin," she cried as she ran up the steps of the great portico, "we've had such a time! 2 punctures and a blowout. I thought we'd never get here." "There, Dorothy. Don't be so precipitous. Let me greet your mother." Dorothy Duncan pouted at the rebuke, but stood aside as Justin Arnold went forward to meet the older lady. "Dear Mrs. Duncan," he said, "how do you do? Are you tired? Have you had a bothersome journey? Won't you sit here?" Mrs. Duncan took the seat offered, and then Arnold turned to Dorothy. "Now it's your turn," he said, smiling at her. "I have to correct your manners when you insist on being so unobservant of the preferment due to your elders." "Oh, Justin, don't use such long words. Are you glad to see me?" Dorothy was unwinding yards of chiffon veiling from her head and neck, and was becoming hopelessly entangled in its coils. But her lovely piquant face smiled out from the clouds of light blue gauze as from a summer sky. Arnold observed her gravely. "Why do you jerk at that thing so?" he said. "You'll spoil the veil, and you're making no progress in removing it, if that's your purpose." "Justin, you're so tiresome. Why don't you help me instead of criticizing? Oh, never mind. Here's Mr. Chapin. He'll help me. Won't you?" The azure-framed face turned appealingly to a man who had just come out of the house. No male human being could have refused that request, and perhaps Ernest Chapin was among those least inclined. "Certainly," he said, and with a few deft and deferential touches he disentangled the fluttering folds, and was rewarded by a quick, lovely, flashing smile. Then the girl turned again to Arnold. "Justin," she said, "why can't you learn to do such things? How can I get through life with a man who can't get my head out of a motor veil?" "Don't be foolish, Dorothy. I supposed you quite capable of adjusting your own toggery." "And must I always do everything I am capable of doing? 'Deed I won't. By the way, Justin, you haven't kissed me yet." She lifted her lovely laughing face, and, a trifle awkwardly, Arnold bent and kissed the rose-leaf cheek. Justin Arnold was one of those men whose keynote seemed to be restraint. Spontaneous motions were never his. Trifling, unmeant words he never spoke, and to imagine him jesting was impossible. Equally impossible to imagine him affectionate or demonstrative. The kiss he gave his fiancée was formal but significant, like the seal on a legal document. It exasperated Dorothy, who was accustomed to have her very glances sought for, her words treasured, and her smiles breathlessly awaited. To have a kiss almost ignored nearly took her off her feet. She said. "Not very lover-like, but I suppose you're embarrassed at the audience." She flashed another smile at Ernest Chapin, and then said, "Come, Mother, let's go to our rooms and— Oh, there's Leila Duane. Hello, girlie." Another motor came purring up, and a tall, graceful girl stepped out and joined the party on the veranda. With a calm correctness of manner she greeted her host, Justin Arnold, and acknowledged an introduction to his secretary, Ernest Chapin. Then, turning to Mrs. Duncan and Dorothy, she chatted gaily after the manner of reunited friends. "How heavenly to be here for a house party! But I thought we'd never get in at those forbidding-looking gates. It's like a picnic in a Bastille or something. Don't you just love it?" "I love it with a lot of people around," returned Dorothy. "But it is Bastille-ish, in spots. However, as it's to be my life prison, I must get used to it." "A prison, Dorothy?" said Arnold, sternly. "You look on it like that." "Of course I do. But you will be a gentle jailer, won't you, Justin, and let me out once in a while to play by myself?" "By yourself?" cried Leila. "Imagine Dorothy Duncan playing by herself. You mean with half a dozen of your groveling slaves." "Half a dozen or one, as the case may be." And Dorothy laughed carelessly. "I'm not sure I don't prefer one to half a dozen." Arnold looked annoyed at the conversation, but only said lightly, "Of course you do. And as I'm the one, I'll attend to the half dozen." "You'll have your hands full," said Leila, laughing. "Are you sure, Mr. Arnold, you can keep our Dorothy in bonds? You know she is a super flirt." "Was, you mean," corrected Arnold, calmly. "Dorothy's flirting days are over." Dorothy glanced at him, about to make a gay and saucy retort, but something in his face deterred her, and she contented herself with a side glance and smile at Ernest Chapin, which revealed small evidence of her subscription to Arnold's statement. "Where is Miss Wadsworth?" she asked. "Such a dear, quaint thing, Leila. You'll adore her. She's Justin's cousin, and incidentally his model. He's enough like her to be his own cousin." "Where is she, Just?" "She will see you at tea time," he replied. "She begs you will excuse her until then." Miss Duane nodded to her maid, who stood waiting, and leading the ladies into the great hall, Arnold left them in charge of the housekeeper, who showed them to their rooms. White Birches was one of the finest old places in America, and took its name from the trees which covered a large part of its 100-acre estate. The house, built by the grandfather of its present owner, was old-fashioned without being antique, but it lent itself readily to modern additions and improvements, and was entirely comfortable, if not strictly harmonious, in design. Its original over-ornateness had been somewhat softened by time, and its heavy architecture and huge proportions gave it a dignity of its own. Justin Arnold had added many ells and wings during his occupancy, and the great spreading pile now possessed a multitude of rooms and apartments furnished in the magnificent style which had always represented the Arnold taste. North of New York City, on Washington Heights, it was scarcely near enough to the metropolis to be called a suburb. Yet easily accessible by steam, trolley, or motor car, White Birches was a delightful home for its occupants, and most hospitable to the stranger within its gates. "Within its gates" is an appropriate phrase, for the only entrance to White Birches was an immense stone archway provided with heavy iron gates. The entire estate was enclosed by a high stone wall, on top of which was further protection from intruders by means of broken glass bottles embedded in cement. This somewhat foreign feature gave a picturesque effect, and the old stone wall, built nearly a century before, was partly covered with trailing vines and tangled shrubbery. But it was intact, and formed an effective barrier against burglars or other marauders. The great gates were locked every night with almost as much ceremony as the lord of an ancient castle would draw his portcullis, and though this excessive precaution was rather because of tradition than fear of present danger, Justin Arnold adhered wherever possible to the customs of his ancestors. His grandfather, perhaps because of the other manners of his times, had an almost abnormal fear of burglars. His somewhat crude burglar alarm had been replaced in later years by Justin's father, and this in turn by Justin himself, so that at present White Birches was fitted out with the most elaborate and efficacious burglar alarm that had yet been invented. Every door and window, every cellar bulkhead, and every opening of any sort, was protected by the tentacles of this far-reaching contrivance. The upper half of every window was further protected by a heavy wire screen or grating, which permitted the upper sash to be raised or lowered for ventilation without setting off the alarm. But when the alarm was set on, and this Justin Arnold attended to himself every night, no external door or window, with the exception noted, could be opened without the alarm being sounded all through the house, in the stables and the garage, where several men servants slept, and in the gatekeeper's lodge. The great iron gates were also connected with the alarm, and although the precaution seemed out of all proportion to the possible danger, it was a tradition in the house of Arnold, and was scrupulously observed. Also there was a night watchman, who must needs punch his time clocks at various stations in the grounds every half hour. There were telegraph and telephone wires, all laid in underground conduits, to prevent their being cut, and these gave quick communication to the police or the fire department in case of need. But though all this sounds complicated and ponderous, yet so complete and perfectly adjusted was the alarm, that the master of the house could turn it on in a moment just before retiring at night, and the butler could turn it off in the morning, and thus it troubled nobody. White Birches could scarcely be called a cheerful place, for the grounds were densely wooded, the gardens broke up by ravines and rocky gorges, and the tangle of undergrowth in many parts so thick and dark that the whole effect was lacking in sunlight and cheer. But Dorothy Duncan had firmly made up her mind that when she was mistress there, as she would be soon, there would be a general clearing out on many of the acres. In determining this she reckoned without her host and future husband. But Dorothy's was a sanguine nature, and she fully expected to win Justin Arnold around her dainty little finger, although as yet the winding had made no progress. As the guests followed Mrs. Garson, the housekeeper, upstairs, Dorothy paused and detained Arnold a moment. "It's lovely of you," she said, smiling and dimpling at him, "to make this party for me. And I'm so glad I'm here first. I like to be the first part of a party." "You're the party of the first part," said Arnold, smiling at his own rather heavy attempt at wit. "Oh, don't say that. It sounds so legal." "Well, you don't want it to be illegal, do you?" "Heavens, Justin! I didn't know you could even pronounce the word illegal. You are the ultra quintessence of legality. There, isn't that a pretty speech?" "No, it isn't, Dorothy, and you know it isn't. Why do you always make fun of me?" The big, soft, dark eyes opened wide. "Why, Justin Arnold! Make fun of you? I couldn't if I wanted to. Nobody could, not even Mark Twain, or Mr. Dooley, or a roof garden man. You're not the stuff that fun is made on. You're a what, Dorothy?" But Dorothy Duncan knew and recognized that note in the man's voice that warned her she had gone far enough. "A dear," she whispered softly, and ran away upstairs. Arnold brushed his hand across his forehead, as if to smooth off any perturbation that the interview might have left, and returned to the veranda to welcome other arriving guests. The man was part and parcel of the old home. His fathers before him had stood on the porch as coaches rolled up the long drive from the gate, and so he stood, to await the motors or station cabs that brought his house party guests. It was early fall. October in merry mood was gaily pelting the flying year with her red and gold leaves, showering them like confetti on a bride. White Birches was looking its best, or one of its bests, for the white of winter and the green of spring gave it different but no less beautiful coloring. But this season the leaves had chosen to turn superbly. No dead rusty brown, but the whole range of the latter half of the spectrum, from gold to crimson, and from orange to scarlet, rioted everywhere against the vivid blue sky. The great surrounding wall had all its prison-like grimness hidden by a blanket whose gorgeousness outrivaled a Navajo. Above it towered the tall old trees, that waved their branches with dignity rather than grace, as befitted the trees of the Arnold estate. And as its present master stood looking with proud content at the majesty of his domain, he wondered for a moment if he had done wisely in choosing a wife to whom dignity and majesty were as nothing. To whom a gay chat, dance, or flirtation summed up all that was worth living for. And then Dorothy's last words returned to his mind. A dear, she had called him, a dear, and the thought thrilled Justin Arnold's not very susceptible pulses. After all, had his ancestors' wives been more beautiful, more adorable than the witch girl he had chosen? And too there returned his firm resolution that he had made before he had asked the girl to marry him. He was going to make her over. Yes, his strong, firm, yet wise guidance would transform the witch girl into a calm, gracious woman, such as he remembered his mother and grandmother, and knew to-day in his cousin Abby. Miss Abby Wadsworth, a cousin of Justin Arnold's, was nominally the head of the house. Although a capable housekeeper and a complete corps of well-trained servants relieved her of all household cares, Miss Abby felt and enjoyed the responsibility of her position. Of course, she would soon have to abdicate in favor of Dorothy Duncan, but she was really glad that Justin was to be married at last. He was a man of 40 years, and had grown so confirmed in his bachelorhood that Miss Abby had feared he would never succumb to any feminine charms. And then he had met Dorothy Duncan, lovely, bewitching, coquettish Dorothy, and he had immediately decided to marry her, for was he not the wealthy Justin Arnold, master of White Birches, and scion of an aristocratic name and lineage? Nor had Miss Duncan hesitated. Slightly dazzled by the wonderful good fortune that had come to her, she had answered yes to his question, and now the wedding day was only a few weeks hence. Dorothy was 22 and intensely romantic, but it ever seemed to her that there was a discrepancy between her own age and that of her lover, or if she ever felt that Justin was a little lacking in his demonstrations of affection, she never shared her thoughts with anyone. Not even her own mother had no reason to believe otherwise than that Dorothy was supremely happy. But Miss Abby Wadsworth wondered. Not to Justin. It was not the habit of their family for the women to question or criticize the men's decisions. But it was an uncertain outlook. Dorothy Duncan was too new, too modern for the old-fashioned setting. Not so much the house, that had been remodeled and readjusted to suit other brides, but the customs and traditions had always been handed down as intact and as untarnished as the family plate or portraits. Ah, portraits! Dorothy would hold her own with those fair women in the picture gallery. Whatever Justin's bride might prove, she was a worthy chatelaine as to looks. And so Miss Abby's ponderings usually wound up with the reflection that Dorothy was a beauty, and if she lacked dignity, she would surely acquire that as Justin's wife. However, Miss Abby knew the girl but slightly, and welcomed this house-party occasion to learn more of her. 2. Willful Dorothy. The week-end party at White Birches was partly by way of an announcement, and partly because Dorothy had requested it. The girl loved social gaiety, and to be the central figure of this merry occasion, yet without being the actual hostess of White Birches, appealed to her. In the stately apartment assigned her, she was making a bewildering toilette, to do honor to her new position, and also for sheer love of seeing herself in pretty clothes. She had decided on a soft satin, whose quivering draperies of deep orange were veiled by a browner, thinner fabric, and whose velvet girdle was gathered into a bucket of tawny gold. From the half-low, rounded neck, her girl throat rose in dimpled loveliness, and from the soft curves of her exquisite chin to the lightly waved mass of her dusky hair, her face was a sparkle of witching, tantalizing beauty. From a huge bowlful in her room she selected a spray of goldenrod and thrust it in her sash. Then, with an approving nod at herself in the long mirror, she went sedately downstairs. Dorothy was nothing if not dramatic. She had waited to make her appearance until all were gathered on the west terrace for afternoon tea. Partially enclosed with glass, yet with wide-open casements framing the autumn landscapes, it was a most attractive setting for the gay groups gathered round the tea-tables. Crossing the big living-room, Dorothy paused and stood in the open window-doors that gave on the terrace. Pensive, rather than smiling, she looked at the group a moment, and Arnold, seeing her, went toward her as a courtier to a queen. Her hand in his, she stepped through the casement, and then, laughing, she dropped her dignified air, and ran to take her place in a large wooden swing, comfortably surrounded with scarlet cushions. One dainty, slippered foot touched the floor now and then as she kept the swing swaying, and in gay mood bandied repartee with the other young people. Leila Duane, the only other young girl present, was a complete foil for Dorothy. Leila's fair beauty, her golden hair and blue eyes and her pale blue crepe gown, set off vividly Dorothy's glowing type, her dark hair, her flashing brown eyes and rosy cheeks. Two young men, Emery Gale and Campbell Crosby, partners of a law firm, and inseparable chums, sat near the girls and alternately teased and complimented them. Ernest Chapin, Arnold's secretary, was also in the group. Chapin was looked upon quite as one of the family. He took care of Justin Arnold's financial interests, planned and advised concerning additions or improvements to the place, looked after the correspondence, and, moreover, was often of help to Miss Wadsworth in her social duties and responsibilities. Chapin was a clean-cut, good-looking young fellow, though without the dash and fashionable nonchalance that characterized Gale and Crosby. These two men lived in Philadelphia, and conducted their law business there. Incidentally, they were Justin Arnold's lawyers, and though he had little legal business to be attended to, it was a convenient pretext for them occasionally to visit White Birches. Emery Gale was of a waggish type. He "jollied" everybody, he said impertinent things under the guise of innocent candor, and he was invariably good-natured and kind-hearted. But beneath his careless manner was a shrewd aptitude for business, and as the senior member of the firm he attended to the more important matters, letting Crosby do the routine work. Campbell Crosby was a cousin of Justin Arnold. Indeed, the two men were the only ones left of the main branch of the family, and though several years younger, Crosby had always been intimate with his cousin, and the two had always been warm friends. As children they had been much together, and Crosby had spent many happy summers at White Birches, admiring and adoring Arnold, as a small boy often does admire an older one. The other guests were Mr. and Mrs. Fred Crane, he a naturalist devoted to his cause, and his wife a pretty little woman with sharp eyes and a sharp tongue, but whose brightness and vivacity made her an attractive guest. She was a distant cousin of Justin Arnold, and the Cranes were frequent visitors at White Birches. But though all present were interesting or charming in their several ways, all were dominated by the presence of that most important personage, Miss Abby Wadsworth. There are women who possess the power of making their presence felt, and that without any apparent effort. Miss Wadsworth was one of these. She had only to sit in her accustomed easy-chair, and her very presence demanded and received recognition and respect. She was, perhaps, 60 years old, a cousin of Justin Arnold's father, and her manner gave the impression that to be a Wadsworth was far more important than to be an Arnold, or, indeed, any other name in any social register. She did not wear the traditional black silk of the elderly cousin, but wore modern and fashionable gowns of becoming color, and of modish though not extreme cut. Everybody liked Miss Abby, and though occasionally she pronounced blunt truths, yet she had a good sense of humor, and was easy enough to get along with, if allowed to dictate in all matters, whether they concerned her or not. "You two men are inseparable," said Dorothy to Mr. Gale and Mr. Crosby. "I think I have never seen one of you without the other." "You will, though," said Campbell Crosby. "Just for that, I'm going to take you for a long walk around the grounds, and we may get lost in a wild wood tangle and never come back." "Like the babes in the wood," said Leila Duane. "If you don't return soon, Mr. Gale and I will go out and cover you with autumn leaves." "But you may not find us," said Crosby. "We may fall into a deep, dank tarn. I've no idea what a deep, dank tarn is, but I know there is one on the place. I remember I used to play around it when I was a boy." "Well, I'd like to see it," said Dorothy, jumping out of her swing. "Come on, Mr. Crosby, and show it to me." "Dorothy," interposed Justin Arnold, "stay where you are. Do you suppose I will let you go walking with another man?" "Do you suppose," retorted Dorothy, "that I will ask for your permission if I choose to go?" The lovely laughing face was so merry that it took away all petulant spirit from the question, and Dorothy's dark eyes flashed with fun as she slowly went toward Crosby. "If you want to see any part of the grounds of White Birches, I will escort you myself," went on Arnold. "Oh, come now, Justin," said Crosby. "Don't begrudge me a little stroll with your girl. I'll bring her back safely." "Let her go, Justin," dictated Cousin Abby. "She'll enjoy a walk with Campbell, and goodness knows she'll see enough of you all the rest of her life. It's only a few weeks to the wedding day, and after that she can't go gadding about with young men. Run along, Dorothy, and flirt with Campbell all you've a mind to." "Yes, do," said Crosby, but whether it was the too eager look in his eyes, or whether Dorothy suddenly decided to humor Justin, she refused to go. "All right," said Crosby gaily, but don't think I don't know why you refused. You just do it to pique me, and make me more crazy about you than ever." As all present were accustomed to Crosby's outspoken remarks, they paid little heed to his speech, but he murmured low in Dorothy's ear, "And that's really true, and you know it. And you'll take that walk with me, see if you don't." "Hold there, Campbell," cried Justin. "Stop whispering to my girl. I declare, old man, if you don't leave her alone, you and I will have to revive the good old fashion of dueling." "Oh, I wish you would!" exclaimed Dorothy, clapping her hands. "Leila, wouldn't you just love to see a real live duel?" "Yes, if they all stayed alive afterward. But I shouldn't want any fatal effects. They're so troublesome and unpleasant." "Take me away, Mr. Crosby," cried Dorothy. "I won't stay where people talk of such awful subjects." "Come along, then, and we'll look up that deep, dank tarn." Dorothy rose from the swaying swing seat, and cast a slightly apprehensive glance at Arnold. But he chanced to have his back turned and did not see her. So, with a beckoning smile at Crosby, she ran down the steps and out on to the lawn. Gaily she ran across the wide greensward, and, rounding a clump of blue spruce trees, was lost to view of those on the terrace. Crosby, following, found her there on a stone garden seat. "You'll catch it," he said, looking down at the laughing face. "Why?" innocently. "Can't I stroll round my own grounds if I like? At least, they soon will be mine." "Do you covet them so much, then?" "Covet isn't a pretty word. Of course I love white birches, though I never would stay here in winter. And of course I should want to go away in summer. But Justin says I may do whatever I wish." "What portion of the year, then, will you spend in this old place you love so well?" Campbell Crosby was talking at random merely for the pleasure of looking down into the lovely face, and watching the dimples come and go as the red lips parted. And he had his wish, for a slow, sweet smile curved the scarlet mouth as Dorothy answered: "Only red and gold days in October. Golden days, like this." Her voice was low and almost caressing in its sweetness, her glance flashed to meet his, and then, with a divine blush, turned slowly away toward the fading sunset. "Is this a golden day? Is it now?" The thrill went out of Dorothy's voice, the faint blush disappeared, but her dimples came into play, as with a soft naturalness she said: "Yes, indeed. Did you ever see one more so? The golden trees, the golden sunset, the very atmosphere is golden." "This hour is golden," whispered Crosby. "You were good to give it to me." "I didn't give it to you. You stole it. Stole it from Justin, and he'll make you pay." "Suppose I make him pay. Pay ransom to get you back. I wonder at how much he'd value you." "He wouldn't need to ransom me. I'd go back of my own accord." "Not if I won't let you. Come, let us find the tarn, and then I don't know, I may throw you in." "What is a tarn, really?" And Dorothy rose and walked with Crosby toward the ravines. Only about an acre of white birches was lawn. Once off that, the grounds became almost like woodland. There were brooks, tiny falls, hillocks, and sometimes deep undergrowth. Much had been made by clever landscape gardeners, but wherever possible the old natural beauties were there. Dorothy had seen little of it all. One brief previous visit had shown her only the gardens and lawns near the house. She said as much to Crosby, and he replied: "Then old Just will give it to me for sure." "Let's go back," said Dorothy, frightened as they found themselves farther and farther from the house. But Crosby walked slowly on, and answered her earlier remark. "Don't you know what a tarn is? Don't you remember Tennyson's line, 'A glen, grey boulder, and black tarn'?" "No, but it sounds like Halloween. Is it?" Crosby laughed out. "You kiddie! Is that what that line makes you think of? By Jove, I wish it were Halloween. Maybe I wouldn't try my fate with you." "You couldn't. My fate is settled. But I'm going to make Justin let me have a Halloween party." Won't it be fun? Now show me the tarn. That's it. Before you. Why, that's only a pool of water. Not clear water at that. But that's all a tarn is, a pool of water. But if it's deep and black and generally shuddery looking, it can be called a tarn. Well, I don't think much of your old tarn. Come on, let's go back. I know why. Because the sun has almost set, and the air is cool, and this place is gloomy, and so it makes you begin to think of how Justin will scold you." Crosby's voice was almost triumphant, and Dorothy looked at him in surprise. "Why, one would think you were glad I'm to be scolded." "I am." "You are? Why?" "Because you are to be scolded for having run away with me. With me," Crosby added, exultantly. "I'd be glad to have you often scolded for that." Dorothy turned and flashed her dark eyes at him. "Do you suppose, for a minute, that Justin will really scold me? Indeed he won't. Nobody scolds me unless I choose to be scolded. If he tries it, I shall smile at him. You can't scold a smiling person, can you?" Apparently Justin Arnold couldn't, for within 5 minutes of the runaway's return, Dorothy was nestled into a cushioned settee, and her fiancé was striving to please her somewhat capricious appetite for icy cakes, the creamy inside kind. End of chapters 1 and 2. Chapters 3 and 4 of The White Alley by Carolyn Wells. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 3. May and December. "I wish I were 3 people," exclaimed Leila Duane. "I want to walk and motor and play golf all at once." It was after luncheon the next day, and the house party congregated for a moment on the terrace before breaking up into smaller groups. The air was full of that October warmth, so much more life-giving and blood-stirring than even the early days of spring. "It's utterly absurd, Dorothy," said Mabel Crane, "for you to think of getting married. You look about 14 today." Dorothy was in walking rig of greenish tweeds. She wore a white silk blouse with a scarlet tie, and a soft green felt hat with a scarlet quill. Her skirt was ankle length, and her low russet shoes showed a glimpse of scarlet stockings. "I'm going to be 14 as long as I can," she returned, smiling. "Soon enough I shall have to become Justin's age. What is it, Just? 60?" "No, he's only 40," put in Miss Abby, seriously. "And you mustn't tease him about it, Dorothy." "Oh, is he sensitive?" And Dorothy pretended to be embarrassed. "Why, I'm sure you look quite youthful, dear." And going to Arnold's side, she laid her hand on his shoulder and scrutinized his face. The contrast was marked. Though a fairly handsome man, Justin Arnold looked his full age, and his stern-set face looked old indeed, beside Dorothy's laughing dimples and shining eyes. "And anyway, when we're married, I think I won't become Justin's age, but make him become mine. How'd you like to be 22, Justy?" "I'll be in my second childhood, if you say so," returned Arnold, and Dorothy rewarded him for this pretty speech with a little tweak of his graying hair. "You seem to know how to manage him all right," laughed Mrs. Crane. "So I suppose you are old enough to be married after all. What are you going to wear at your wedding? A short skirt and tam o' shanter?" "White, I suppose, but I do think it's awfully hackneyed. I wish I could wear some bright color." "Why, Dorothy, how you talk!" exclaimed her mother, who was always shocked at the slightest unconventionality. "She's right," said Emery Gale. "One does get awfully tired of a white-robed bride. Now a lot of gay colors, Scotch plaid for choice, would be awfully fetching." "How foolish men are," said Mrs. Crane, with an air of saying something new. "Of course your gown'll be white, Dorothy. Ivory satin, I suppose, with an embroidered train, and a priceless lace veil." "I suppose so," said Dorothy, with a resigned air. "I say, Justin, if I've got to have that wedding dress, and so soon, can't I run away and play with Campbell just a little while? He has asked me to." "Yes, go," said Arnold, frowning. Go and stay as long as you like. What do I care?" "Come on, then," said Dorothy, tucking her hand through Crosby's arm. But now, perhaps because of his cousin's frown, Crosby did not seem anxious for the walk. "I was only fooling," he said. "But I wasn't," persisted Dorothy. "Well, if you won't go, who will accompany me for a little stroll?" 3 men started toward her at once. Arnold himself was the first one. Emery Gale stepped forward smiling, and with a slightly hesitating step, Ernest Chapin came toward Dorothy and bowed gravely. "Why, Mr. Chapin," cried the little coquette, "I'd rather stroll with you than anybody. Come on." The two walked away, and Arnold's brow cleared. He was quite willing Dorothy should walk with his quiet-mannered and rather dull secretary, but he did not want her to go frisking about with gay young men of her own set. "She's a case," said Mrs. Crane to Miss Wadsworth, as they watched the pair depart. "A very sweet, dear little case," returned Miss Abby, fairly bristling in defense of Dorothy. "She's so pretty and attractive, she can't help being a little coquettish. But she really does it to tease old Justin, and it does him good, too. He's 40 years old, and she's only 22. That's too much difference altogether. But Dorothy knows what she's about, and she'll make that man younger by many years with her pretty frivolities." "I think it a little dangerous," said Mrs. Crane, who rarely hesitated to say what she thought. "Dangerous? What do you mean?" said Dorothy's mother, and the gleam that came into her eye was markedly dangerous of itself. Mrs. Crane quailed before it. "I didn't mean anything much," she said, "but 18 years is a big difference in age between husband and wife. But I'm sure I hope they'll be happy." "Of course they'll be happy," said Mrs. Duncan. "Mr. Arnold is of a kind and lovable disposition. He's a true gentleman, and he is generous and wise." "He's a crank, that's what he is," said Miss Wadsworth, with an air of settling the question. "A man can't be a bachelor of 40 without having cranky ways, and as I know him pretty well, I know he isn't very easy to get along with. But Dorothy can tame him if anybody can, and she's going about it just the right way. A patient Griselda couldn't do anything with Justin, but a little witch like Dorothy can rule him with a flash of her bright eye." "Yes," said Mrs. Duncan complacently. "That's what I think." "But does she love him?" persisted Mrs. Crane, who never knew when to stop asking questions. "My daughter wouldn't marry a man she didn't love," and Mrs. Duncan put on a superior air that silenced though it didn't convince Mabel Crane. "Of course," said Miss Abby, "Dorothy loves Justin, and it's a fine match for her from every point of view. A kind husband with lots of money and a beautiful big home like this is better for any girl than a foolish romance with some young whippersnapper with nothing but poverty to look forward to." This speech seemed to require no answer, and Mrs. Duncan smoothed the silken folds of her gown complacently, while Mrs. Crane let her pretty face assume a cynical expression. "If Justin didn't marry," Mrs. Crane asked, "what would eventually become of the property?" "Campbell Crosby is really the next heir," said Miss Abby, "though he belongs to a different branch of the family." "But yourself?" went on Mrs. Crane, with some curiosity. "Wasn't your mother an Arnold?" "Yes, but of course I wouldn't be the heir. Justin has made a will, leaving me a big legacy, but except for that and a few other legacies, his whole estate, including White Birches, would go to Campbell." "Campbell Crosby seems out of place in a home like this," commented Mrs. Duncan. "It just suits Justin Arnold to be at the head of a big country house, but that feather-brained young fellow seems better adapted to city life." "Yes, he always lives in a hotel in Philadelphia," said Miss Abby. "Nothing would induce him, he has often said, to live the life of a country gentleman. Many a time I've heard him tell Justin he didn't see how any man could stand it to be mewed up inside these stone walls. though he likes well enough to come down here for an occasional week-end. But when he was a boy he used to be here for months at a time. He liked it then well enough. Though 8 years younger than Justin, they were good comrades, and wherever Justin would go Campbell would follow. My, I've seen them climbing sloping turret roofs and walking around the tower battlements till it fairly made my hair stand on end. They were harum-scarum boys. And Campbell is that still, though Justin quieted down as he grew older." "Yes, Justin seems very staid," said Mabel Crane. "Though I dare say his marriage to a bright young thing like Dorothy will have a rejuvenating effect on him." "I dare say," said Miss Abby dryly. "And of course it cuts Campbell out of the inheritance. I've no doubt Justin will leave him a handsome legacy in his will, but of course Dorothy will be his heir." "My ears burn," said Crosby, walking toward the group of chatting ladies. "Miss Duane has gone off skylarking with Gale, and being left alone, I tried to listen to what you fair ladies might be saying, and was rewarded by hearing my own name." "Yes," said Miss Abby, smiling at the pleasant face of the young man. "We were saying that Justin's marriage will cut off your hopes of inheriting his estate." Crosby gave her a slightly reproachful glance. "Dear Miss Abby," he said, "I don't think I've ever given you reason to talk like that. I've never looked upon myself as heir to White Birches, and I wouldn't want it anyway, though I don't mean that for sour grapes. I hope old Just will live heaps of years yet to enjoy it, and Dorothy, too." His voice broke a little as he mentioned the girl's name, and as his hearers were well aware of his feeling toward her, they quite understood. Just then Arnold came by and paused to listen. "No, old Just," and Crosby turned to his cousin, "I don't want your fortune, and I don't want this feudal castle of yours, but unless you're pretty careful, I'll kidnap your girl and carry her off." "You can't do it, Cam," and Arnold put his hand on the other man's shoulder. "Not only is Dad's old burglar alarm in good working order, but I've added some modern contraptions that make it impossible for anyone to get in or out of White Birches unbeknownst." "Love laughs at locksmiths," said Campbell saucily. And Mrs. Duncan observed, "And then, too, Mr. Crosby, you'd have to get Dorothy's consent first. I hardly think she'd be willing to be kidnapped." "Oh, kidnappers never ask permission of their victims," retorted Crosby. "I should spirit her away without anyone knowing it." Arnold looked at the speaker a little quizzically. "Then why didn't you go to walk with her this afternoon?" he said. Crosby looked him straight in the eye and said quietly, "Because you didn't want me to." "Good old man." And Arnold's tone and expression betrayed the real feeling he felt for this manly behavior. "But I mightn't always be so punctilious," laughed Crosby, who was determined not to treat the matter seriously. "Another time I may take her to walk, whether with your permission or without it." "I'll trust you, old man." And this was corroborated by a hearty slap on the shoulder. "By the way, Cam, I wish you'd come for a stroll with me. I want to talk over some business matters." Rightly guessing that it was in regard to the making of a new will, Crosby sauntered off with his cousin. "You see," Arnold said, "if I didn't marry, old chap, my fortune would fall to your share eventually." "Fiddlesticks!" returned his cousin. "Anyone would think you were a doddering old gentleman, and I your young and upstart heir. Please remember I'm only 8 years younger than you are, so I hold we're contemporaries and have little chance of inheriting from each other. And anyway, Just, I wish you'd cut out that kind of talk. You know perfectly well I don't want your riches, nor this fortified old barracks of yours either. But I do wish you hadn't selected for your future bride the only girl I ever loved." "The latest, you mean?" said Arnold, slightly smiling. "I remember definitely about a score of those only girls you ever loved, and I think there are a few I've forgotten." "Oh, come now, I never really loved anyone but Dorothy." "I'm truly sorry, old chap, but it can't be helped now. And I'd feel sorrier still, but that I know you'll find another only girl to love, now that Dorothy is out of the running. And now, Cam, I want you and Gale to draw me up a new will. I'm going to leave a fairish little sum to you whether you want it or not, and a bunch to Cousin Abby, and a good bit to Driggs and Peters. And the housekeeper? Oh, yes, Mrs. Carson. But these legacies are the same as they stand in my present will. Oh, cut it, Justin. You're only making this will because you think it devolves on the head of the house of Arnold to do that sort of thing. Don't bother about it for the present. You'll be married in a few weeks, and then Dorothy will be your legal heir, and you can fix up your will and that precious legacy to me afterwards. You're a good sort, Campbell. I have got a lot of things to attend to before the wedding, so perhaps it will be as well to leave that matter until afterward. Anyway, I suppose I'd better take up the subject with Gale. It might be less embarrassing, as I'm not going to leave him anything. Or if you prefer, I'll get another lawyer for the purpose. Do as you like, old chap. But I say just, I wish you'd let me off from being your best man. Truly, I'm hard hit by that little black-eyed witch, and confound it, a fellow hates to stand tamely by and fairly assist another fellow to marry the girl he cares for. Why, Cam, I didn't know you were so serious as all that. Of course I'll let you off, if you insist. Chapin could be my best man, I suppose. Or Gale. Or even Fred Crane. There are plenty of fellows, but I expected to have you. Well, I'd rather you get someone else, if you will. I say, Justin, do you remember the day we climbed that turret? Shinned up the outside? We were a venturesome pair of kids, weren't we? Yes. I expect there were mighty few places about this old house that we didn't climb up or over or through. And you used to boost me up into all sorts of dark holes where you were too big to get in yourself, and I felt honored to be used for such a purpose. We never climbed over the wall, did we? No, we never could manage that. That's a pretty good wall, Cam. Yes, as walls go. But I think it's a blot on the landscape. It's of no earthly use. Why don't you tear it down? Tear it down? I'd as soon think of razing the house to the ground. It's a stunning old pile, isn't it? The two men stood on a knoll which gave one of the best views of the old mansion. The additions that had been made from time to time were not inharmonious, and though it was a rambling structure, it was as a whole pleasing to the eye. I shall make quite a lot of changes for Dorothy, Justin said. I think I'll put up a whole new wing, and let her have a suite of rooms with every possible modern beauty of decoration and appointment. Do? You're a lucky dog, Just, to have the privilege of doing things for that girl. Oh, well, it's all in a lifetime. The two men walked on in silence for a few minutes, and then, as by a common impulse, they turned and went back to the house to join the others. But as everybody was dressing for dinner, the terrace was deserted. "There's a dance on tonight, old man," said Arnold. "Just a small one, but Dorothy wanted some amusement, so I invited a few of the neighbors." "All right," answered Crosby, and he went on to the smoking room. 4. With dancing steps. Dinner that night was a gay function. A few of the dance guests had been invited to dine, and more would come later. Dorothy appeared in a daring little dancing frock of scarlet chiffon, whose low bodice showed her girlish dimpled shoulders and rounded baby-like arms. She was quite in her element, for by virtue of her position she was queen of the occasion, and by virtue of her charms and fascination she was easily belle of the ball. Leila, in pale green, was beautiful, but her exquisite blonde beauty faded and paled beside Dorothy's sparkling witchery. Mrs. Duncan, shining in the reflected light of her daughter, was calmly gracious of manner, and in her white silk clouded with black lace looked charmingly attractive. But far from being outshone by her younger guests, Miss Wadsworth appeared in the full glory of a rose-colored satin, with much point lace and many jewels. "Don't come near me, child," she cried as she saw Dorothy's scarlet frills. "Why didn't you let me know you were going to wear red? Never mind. Keep the length of the room between us for this evening, and hereafter we'll compare notes before we dress." Dorothy laughed, and promised to stay away from Miss Wadsworth, and keep near Mrs. Crane, who in pale corn color harmonized with Dorothy's brilliant garb. But the red frock was not often seen beside the yellow one, for Dorothy was beset on all sides by would-be partners. Her dances were divided, and the intervals between them were carefully portioned out to eager swains, some of whom met the little witch for the first time that evening. "Isn't this my dance?" said Arnold, coming up to her as she sat in a window seat with Emery Gale. "I hope so," said Gale, "for perhaps you'll be able to keep this young person in order. She's flirting desperately all over the place, and has even tried her beguiling arts on me." "Nothing of the sort," said Dorothy, pouting. "I shouldn't waste them on you. You're too unappreciative." Then, turning to Arnold, with an exaggerated gesture of appeal, she said, "Let me fly with you, O lord of my life. Everyone else bores me to extinction, and I live only in hope of being again with you." Though these fervid words were uttered in deep, vibrant tones, Dorothy's glances strayed wickedly toward Gale, and the humorous twinkle in her eyes proved that her speech was merely a joke born of her high spirits and love of foolery. But Arnold grasped her arm and drew her almost roughly out of the dancing room, through the great hall and out on a small veranda, where they found themselves alone in the moonlight. "Dorothy!" he exclaimed in angry accents, "what do you mean by guying me like that? Don't you know I won't stand it?" "I know you will," cooed Dorothy, as with her little finger tips she daintily patted his bronzed cheek. The touch of those soft fingers put an end to scolding, as Dorothy knew it would, but though Justin's arm went round her, and his voice became tender and lover-like, he could not resist a little more plain speaking. "It's bad enough now, when we're only engaged, but if after we are married you go flirting about with every Tom, Dick, and Harry, there'll be trouble." "There'll be trouble anyway after I'm married." And Dorothy drew down the corners of her dimpled mouth with the expression of one who foresees dire disaster. "What do you mean by that?" "Oh, Justin, you're so severe and hard and dictatorial. I just know you won't let me do anything after we're married." "Then why do you marry me?" "Because I want to. But I do want you to be a little kinder to me, a little more lenient, a little more gentle." Naughty Dorothy squeezed out a tear or two, which, as she had fully intended, brought Arnold to his knees, figuratively. He did not actually kneel, but he gathered the little witch in his arms and said, "Don't cry, dear. You shall have everything you want, and nothing you don't want, after we're married. There. How does that suit your little ladyship?" "That's all right, then." And Dorothy smiled through what was left of her 2 tears. "And now, Justin, you must take me back, for I've promised this dance to Mr. Chapin." "Chapin? I say, Dorothy, it's awfully good of you to give him a dance, when you have so many more interesting men at your feet. Dance with him all you like, dear, but don't dance much with Cam Crosby, will you?" "Jealous of your own cousin? Fie, fie, I won't promise. He has asked me for a whole heap of dances." "I don't doubt that, but I give you fair warning. Every time I see you with him I'm coming to take you away. I only wish I could dance myself, and then no other man should have a single turn." "You're an old fogey, Justin. You can't dance, and you can't play bridge, and you can't do much of anything gay and jolly." Then, as a dark frown settled on her lover's face, she whispered close to his ear, "But I love you," and then turned quickly to find Ernest Chapin waiting for her. "Don't let's dance, let's sit out," he said, leading her back to the very same little veranda where she had just been with Arnold. It was a dear little nook, with moonlight gleaming through the tracery of vines, which made weird black shadows on its light stone floor. It was secluded from passers-by, and as Chapin paused and drew Dorothy to him in the dark of its shadows, he whispered passionately, "Dear, I can't stand it. I can't see you with him, and see his air of ownership of you." "But I'm going to marry him. Why shouldn't he show an air of ownership?" Dorothy spoke coldly, but she was trembling, and her large eyes lifted themselves to Chapin's face with a despairing glance. He clasped her 2 little hands tightly in his own. "You are selling yourself to him," he exclaimed in tense, low tones. You know you love me, and yet you are marrying Arnold because he is rich." "It is not so. You have no right to talk to me like that. I adore him. I worship the ground he walks on." "You blessed baby," said Chapin, putting his arm around her. "The very emphasis you put on those ridiculous words proves how false they are. Dorothy, dearest, tell me just once that you do love me, and I will let you go." "You must let me go anyway, Ernest. Don't hold me, please don't. Justin may come back at any moment." "I don't care. I wish he would. Dorothy, how can you marry that man, almost old enough to be your father? How can you sell yourself for wealth and high position?" But Dorothy's senses had returned. "I'm not doing anything of the sort, Mr. Chapin, and I command you to stop talking to me like that. As you know, I never even saw you until after I was engaged to marry Mr. Arnold. If I had met you sooner—" There was a little break in Dorothy's voice, and Chapin whispered, despairingly, "Oh, darling, if you only had." "And now," Dorothy went on, "there is nothing more to be said on this subject, now or ever. It is not honorable in you, Mr. Chapin, nor in me. In a few weeks I shall marry Mr. Arnold, and I hope I may trust you never to say anything of this nature to me again." "I hope you may trust me, Dorothy," said the man brokenly, "but I know I cannot trust myself." "At least we can try," said Dorothy in a low voice, and then without another word they returned to the dancing room. "Mine!" cried Emery Gale as he caught sight of Dorothy and went toward her with open arms. "What?" exclaimed Arnold, who was hovering near. "Heavens, old man, don't kill me. I only meant this is my dance with Miss Duncan." "Oh," said Arnold, who was miserably jealous and couldn't hide it. He dropped into a chair and watched the girl he loved enfolded in another man's arms. Not being a dancer, Arnold couldn't look on such an embrace impersonally. His reason told him that every girl on the dancing floor was necessarily encircled by her partner's arms, but that didn't take away his hatred of seeing Dorothy so close to Emery Gale. He would have objected equally to any other man, but Gale was a daredevil, and Arnold knew him better than Dorothy did. Still, he couldn't forbid her dancing with one of his own house guests, and incidentally one of his own lawyers. Gale and Crosby were the successors of the firm that had been his father's lawyers, and so Justin employed them, although a firm doing business in New York would often have been more convenient. "Your little friend seems peeved," said Gale to Dorothy as they dipped and sidestepped. "Rather," said Dorothy carelessly. "He can't bear to see me dance. He doesn't dance at all, you know, and he thinks it's a personal affront to him when I do. Besides, these new dances are a sort of revelation to him. When he was young he saw the polka redowa and such things, he tells me, and then he went into his shell, and never came out till he was engaged to me, and now these aesthetic dances shock him all to pieces." "But he must be educated up to them," returned Gale, as he skillfully piloted his light-footed partner among the maze of people. "Yes," and Dorothy shook her pretty head decidedly, "for I expect to dance as long as I live." "Let's give him a benefit lesson now, then, and help his education along as rapidly as possible." Gale smiled into Dorothy's eyes, and the girl understood. Both of them were excellent dancers, and were well versed in all the newest and most intricate steps. Both knew how to exaggerate or prune the effects of the more conspicuous dances, and Dorothy gleefully consented to be led around toward the corner where Arnold waited for her return. She was always ready for mischief, and she liked Emery Gale, but too she honestly wanted her future husband to realize that it was her intention to dance all she chose and as she chose, both before and after her marriage to him. So, as they neared Arnold, their step became more daring, their pose more relaxed, and though it meant nothing to the dancers, Arnold saw it and went white with fury. Without looking at her fiancé, Dorothy kept her earnest gaze on Gale, partly to watch his intended direction, and as much to tease the man who looked angrily after her. "He's madder 'n hops," announced Gale cheerfully. "Shall we go round again?" Dorothy had lost her head a little in the whirling rhythm, and she only whispered, "Yes." and went on dipping and swaying to the enticing music. "Let's do that last new humoresque," murmured Gale as they neared Arnold, and as they passed him both were engrossed in the intricacies of the difficult dance. Arnold in his ignorance mistook their absorption for interest in each other, and ground his teeth in rage as they went by without a look toward him. The music stopped, and flushed and a little breathless, but indescribably lovely, Dorothy, leaning on Gale's arm, sauntered to Arnold's corner. "There, Justy, how do you like our very latest achievement?" And Dorothy bridled with pretty vanity. If there was one thing Arnold hated, it was to be called Justy, and Dorothy knew it. But her spirit of mischief was in the ascendant to-night, and she couldn't resist adding fuel to the flame she had already roused. "It's absolutely disgraceful, Dorothy, and I forbid you ever to give such an exhibition again." "Oh, come now, old chap," said Gale. "Don't be so old fogey and backwoodsy and hidebound." "And old maidish," put in Dorothy, "and dog-in-the-mangerish. Just because you can't dance, you needn't revile my skill in that direction." "And by Jove, skill it is!" exclaimed Crosby, who had come up. "I say, Dorothy, I never saw anyone put that through as you did. The next is ours, isn't it?" "Indeed it isn't," laughed Dorothy. "The next is Mr. Gale's." This was too much for Arnold. Taking Dorothy's arm a little firmly, he led her into the next room, which was the big cozy living room. "Help! Help!" called Dorothy, laughing over her shoulder, and Gale and Crosby followed the pair. Unafraid of Arnold when there were others present, Dorothy flung herself on a big sofa among a heap of cushions. "Now scold," she said, looking up at her tortured lover. Who could scold such a vision of loveliness? Her perfect arms extended along the cushions, her dainty feet crossed, and her roguish daring face smiling with full assurance of her own power. Arnold stood in front of her, and tried to steel himself against this witchery. "I am going to scold you, Dorothy," he began, but she interrupted. "No, you're not," and sprang up and faced him. There was a tense, breathless moment, as if the two wills measured against each other. Dorothy stood, one hand resting on a library table, her parted lips matching her scarlet frock, her eyes and hair black as night, and her compelling glance holding Arnold's own. Watching closely, she saw his mouth relax a trifle, and she knew she had won. The reaction left her a little embarrassed, for both Gale and Crosby were watching the scene. In her nervousness Dorothy fingered the articles on the table, and chanced to touch a Spanish dagger lying there. It was a dangerous-looking affair, and though there for the purposes of a paper cutter, it was rarely used, and even the parlour maid touched it gingerly when dusting. Dorothy's face broke into smiles, and grasping the thing, she struck an attitude like a miniature and very modern Judith, and cried, "Stop looking daggers at me, Justin, or I will return your glance thus." With a mock tragic gesture she pointed the dagger at Arnold's heart, and then tossing it back on the table she smiled and said, "No, I'll punish you this way instead." And rising on tiptoe, she kissed him lightly on the cheek. Not yet accustomed to this volatility, Arnold looked first bewildered, then pleased, then embarrassed. "Dorothy," he mumbled, "before people." "Oh, these people don't mind. Do you, boys?" And Dorothy smiled carelessly at her audience of two. Then she picked up the dagger again. "I love the feel of these things," she said, running her little forefinger lightly along the blade. "I think my ancestors were pirates and Spanish dancing girls. A stab in the dark." And making a lunge toward Gale, she assumed the attitude of a small but very ferocious pirate. "Dorothy! For heaven's sake, behave yourself!" cried Arnold. "Put that thing down." "All right." And Dorothy laid the dagger in its place. "But I do feel dramatic. Mayn't I play tableau, Justin?" "Play whatever you like, if you don't touch that fiendish thing. I'll have it thrown away." "No, don't!" cried Dorothy. "I just love it. Give it to me, won't you, dear? For a wedding present. But you'll have to, if you give me all your worldly goods." "Well, I still feel dramatic. If I can't play with the dagger, I'll have to choose more simple themes. Mr. Gale, will you play living pictures with me?" "Yes, if you'll show me how, I'm at your service. What must I do?" Gale stepped forward and stood in a waiting position. Dorothy looked at him thoughtfully, her head on one side, like a perplexed connoisseur. "Why," she said, laughing, "you look exactly like the man in that foolish old picture of the Huguenot lovers. See, this way." Dorothy caught up a light couch cover and draped it over Gale's shoulder, and then announcing in showman-like voice, "The famous painting, The Huguenot Lovers," she threw herself into Gale's arms and assumed a most exaggerated look of despairing affection. Gale quickly caught the allusion and cleverly took the pose shown in the well-known picture. It was over in a moment, and laughing Dorothy sprang back, saying, "I always thought I had dramatic talent. Now I'm sure of it. Why don't you applaud, Justin?" "Never mind him," said Campbell Crosby. "He's got a grouch to-night. Come, play a living picture with me, Dorothy. What shall it be? Oh, I know. Do you remember that fearful old thing called 'Alone at Last'?" "Yes," said Dorothy, laughing. "It is in my great-aunt's parlor. It's like this." Crosby, with clever caricature, reproduced the stilted pose of the hero of the old classic, and Dorothy hung around his neck in a dragging way, with a look of utter infatuation on her lovely face. Arnold missed the burlesque effect and saw only the embrace. He rose steadily, though he felt as if the earth were rocking beneath him. "I've had enough of this," he said in a low, even voice, and walked slowly toward the door. "Oh, wait, Justy," cried Dorothy. "I'm going to give The Conscript's Departure next, and I want you to act it with me." "Thank you," said Arnold, not looking at her. "I have no talent for that sort of thing. You have all the mummers you need." "But you are acting a picture now," called Dorothy as he reached the door. "You're giving a splendid representation of 'The Girl I Left Behind Me.'" Arnold strode away, and Gale said, curiously, "Aren't you afraid to stir him up like that?" "I'd be afraid not to." And Dorothy spoke without a smile. "I must get him used to my foolishness, if I expect to have any fun at all after I'm married." "But will you be married, if you go much further in this mad career that you're pursuing to-night?" "Oh, yes, if I want to. I'll give Justin a little while to calm down, and then I'll go and make up. I'm a great little old make-upper, I am." "But he's pretty mad just now," said Crosby, who knew Arnold thoroughly. "No matter," and Dorothy tossed her curly head. "He's been pretty mad lots of times, but I can manage him." "I wish you weren't going to marry him," blurted out Crosby. "So do I, sometimes." And Dorothy drew a sigh that might have been genuine or merely for dramatic effect. "If he ever scolds you, I'll kill him," Crosby declared, and Dorothy, smiling, returned, "He'll never scold me. If he does, I'll kill him myself. Come on, there's the music again. Let's go and dance." End of chapters 3 and 4. Chapters 5 and 6 of The White Alley by Carolyn Wells. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 5. Scolding is barred. "There's no use talking, Justin. I have promised to be your wife, and I will. But I will not be your slave or submit to tyranny. It is to be understood that after we are married I am to dance as much as I like and with whom I like, and you are not to scold or be grumpy about it. Do you agree?" "But, Dorothy, these modern dances are improper." "They are not. Every one dances them. Do you suppose my mother would sit by and see me if I danced improperly? And another thing, I wish you wouldn't say 'these modern dances' as if you were of your grandfather's generation. Aren't you modern yourself? I am living to-day, and so are you. You may have been born 20 years before I was, but you are now living in the same era, and you've got to act so. Won't you, dear?" It was the morning after the dance, and it was Sunday, and the pair were strolling around the park. Dorothy, not in outing garb, but wearing a dainty little house frock of pink linen, looked very dear and sweet. She was "making up" with Arnold, and it was not a simple matter, for she was setting the pace for her future life. She had thought it over, in her wise little head, and she knew that if she could get him to agree to certain stipulations, he would never break his word. "I do want to be all that you want me to be, darling," Arnold said, looking troubled. "But you must know, that there is a certain dignity expected from a married woman that is imperiled by such exhibitions as you gave last evening with Gale."
"Oh, Emery Gale! Isn't he the funniest man? I never thought a lawyer could be so frivolous. Mr. Crosby isn't."
"No, Cam Crosby is more serious. By the way, do you like him, Dorothy?"
"Who? Mr. Crosby? Yes, rather. But I like all men, Justin. Why shouldn't I? They're all so nice to me."
"Oh, child," Arnold groaned. "What can I do with you?"
"Love me," said pretty Dorothy, and held up her lovely lips for a kiss.
Rarely was she so spontaneously gracious, and Arnold caught her passionately in his arms. "You beauty! You love! Dorothy, you do love me, don't you?"
"Of course I do, when you're good to me. And don't scold me."
"I'll never scold you. But, dearest, you don't care for Cam, do you? He's mad about you."
"Nonsense! He isn't. And I don't care two straws for him, if he is."
"Nor Gale?"
"Emery Gale? Why, Justin, he's in love with Leila."
"With Miss Duane? Is he?"
"Oh, neither of them have told me so, but I know."
And Dorothy wagged her pretty head like a wise, rosy cheeked owl. "Then there's one less man for me to be jealous of." And Arnold laughed grimly.
"But what's one among 100?"
And Dorothy smiled saucily at him.
"Don't be jealous, Just. It makes an awful lot of trouble. Oh, here are the Cranes."
"Yes, here we are," said Fred Crane. "Sorry to interrupt a tête-à-tête."
"Not at all," said Mrs. Crane. "It's lucky we came, for I heard Dorothy asking Justin not to be jealous. Take my advice, Dot. Let him be jealous. It keeps him in love with you." "I don't care how jealous he is," said Dorothy, "if he won't scold me. I just simply can't bear to be scolded. And I won't stand it."
She stamped her little slippered foot, and looked at Arnold with such an adorable pout that he had to smile at her. But he said staunchly, "You'll never get scolded unless you deserve it, my dear."
"Well, that's something,"
put in Mabel Crane hastily, for the clouds gathered on Dorothy's brow.
"Some poor wives get scolded whether they deserve it or not."
"Not you!" And fat, good-natured Fred Crane looked smilingly at his good-natured wife.
"There, Justin. See that?" cried Dorothy. "Mr. Crane wouldn't scold Mabel, no matter what she did. Promise you won't scold me, ever."
"The Arnolds never make foolish promises, Dorothy. Nor do the Arnolds scold. If you ever deserve reprimand, I shall certainly give it to you." Dorothy gave up the siege for the time.
"I won't, dear,"
she said in the meekest possible voice, but the smile she turned on Justin was offset by the suspicion of a wink in Mabel Crane's direction. "We've been hunting specimens," said Fred Crane to divert the trend of thought. He was in knickerbockers, and carried a specimen case and butterfly net. "Get anything?" asked Arnold perfunctorily. "Several worth-while bits. Almost had a fine white moth, but he got away. By Jove, I should have had him, if I could have climbed your confounded wall. In heaven's name, Arnold, why the broken glass? Didn't your revered ancestors have any other place to put their old bottles?"
"Don't you make fun of Justin's revered ancestors," cried Dorothy. "They're pretty nearly my ancestors. Will they be mine, Just, when we are married? Do you endow me with them, along with your other worldly goods? Or aren't they worldly goods?"
"Don't talk like that, Dorothy," said Arnold gently.
please show a little reverence for my sake, if not for your own." "Oh, there's no pleasing my lord and master this morning. I think I'll seek fresh fields and pastures new. Oh, look who's here! Mr. Gale, won't you come out and play with me?" And dancing up to Emery Gale, she tucked her hand through his arm and led him directly away from the others. "I know you were in search of Leila," she said, as soon as they rounded the corner of the path through the wood, "and I'll take you to her in a minute. But I want to borrow you just now." "I am honored and proud at this favor. What can I do for you?" "Flirt with me. No, not now. Only when Justin can see us." "What a rogue you are!" Gale had meant to say something harsher, but he couldn't, with that dimpled face looking up into his. "All's fair in love and war," said Dorothy, tossing her head. "I have to train Justin in my own way, you see. But never mind me. Let's talk about Leila. I always try to interest my companions." "And you think Miss Duane interests me?" "Rather. And I don't wonder. Leila is a dear and a sweet." "But do you think I interest her? That's more to the point." "I think you do. But Leila's coy, and if you're going in to win you ought to make a braver attack. Now I chance to know she's at this moment on that little south balcony, and if you go right straight there you will have an excellent opportunity to discuss the weather with her." "And you?" "I see Mr. Chapin approaching in the dim distance. Oh, I wouldn't dismiss you until I had a perfectly good substitute. Woo-hoo! Mr. Chapin! Don't you want to take me to see the ducks?" Ernest Chapin came forward eagerly. He said little, but his eyes shone and his face glowed as he led Dorothy toward the duck pond, while Gale went on his quest of Leila. "Why don't you talk?" said Dorothy, a little frightened at the tense silence. Chapin stood still, turned her around, and looked deep into her eyes. "Because I'm too happy. I've heard of a happiness too deep for words, and now I know what it means." "Don't," said Dorothy, weakly. "Don't. I can't bear it. You promised you wouldn't." "Oh, no, I didn't. But if I did, if I promised it 100 times, I never could keep such a promise. To be with you, alone with you. Oh, Dorothy!" "Hush! There's Miss Abby." And the two composed themselves just in time to smile at their hostess, who was sitting on a garden bench. "Just the one I wanted to see," called out Dorothy gaily. "Now you go away, Mr. Chapin. This is going to be a meeting of the Women's Club." Chapin bowed and went on, and Dorothy sat down beside Miss Wadsworth and patted her hand. Now Miss Abby was far from dull, and she scented trouble in the girl's manner. "Well," she said dryly, "have you quarreled with Justin?" "Aren't you the mind reader?" And Dorothy looked honestly surprised. "No, we haven't exactly quarreled. But oh, well, Miss Abby, we're awfully different." "Yes, you are, Dorothy. But I'm hoping your two natures will react on each other to the benefit of both." Dorothy looked relieved. "Oh, do you think so? I'm so glad, for I've been wondering if I ought to marry him when I'm so far from his ideal of all a woman should be. I wondered, too, at first, but I've concluded that Justin loves you, as he never could love his ideal if he had her." "I know he loves me, but sometimes I feel so unworthy of his love. And, Miss Abby, I don't mean that I feel myself unworthy, but I'm so afraid he'll think I am." The older woman smiled at this naive confession, but she said, "I understand, dear. But I think you ought to try a little harder to do and be as Justin wants you to. You love him, don't you?" I think so," faltered Dorothy. "But when he is so stern, it makes me hate him." "That's a good sign," and Miss Abby smiled. "Better hate him than be indifferent. And I really think, my dear, that your love will grow steadily and surely the longer you live with him, and learn what a really fine, true nature he has." So Dorothy smoothed out her temper and patted her little soul on the back and resolved to be awfully good to old Justin, and not to flirt with other men to tease him, and especially never, never to let herself be left alone with Ernest Chapin for one single little minute. And all the rest of the day she devoted herself to Arnold, and was so sweet and docile and altogether angelic that her lover concluded he had at least learned the way to manage her. Though the house party had been asked only for the week-end, most of the guests were easily persuaded to stay a few days longer. Emery Gale and Campbell Crosby were the only ones who were unable to accept their host's invitation to remain longer at White Birches. Business called them, they declared, and they were obliged to leave at noon on Monday for Philadelphia. Dorothy and Leila gave way to protestations of great grief at parting with them, and though the protestations were mere fooling, yet Crosby looked longingly into Dorothy's eyes, while, unconscious of this, Gale was pouring out his whole soul in a glance for Leila's benefit. The girls had accompanied the departing guests in one of Justin's big motor cars as far as the Fordham Heights station. From here the men went to New York and later took the train for Philadelphia. Though usually inclined to light and desultory chatter, Gale and Crosby said little to each other during the first miles of their train ride. But after they had smoked for a while in silence, they grew a little less taciturn and a little more inclined to be sociable. "Hang it all," said Gale at last, "if I had time and opportunity, I believe I could induce that sweet young thing to be all my very own." "What's the matter with you?" growled Crosby. "She's going to marry Justin, and you'd better keep off." "Great snakes, man, I don't mean Dorothy. I mean the pretty one, the lovely Leila." "Oh, Miss Duane?" "Yes, she's pretty enough in her way, but she can't hold a candle to that rosy little peach of a Dorothy. Dorothy is a beauty, all right, but she's too indiscriminating in her favors. She'd flirt with anybody, whether she's engaged to him or not." "I wish she'd flirt with me," said Crosby, gloomily. "But never mind me. Are you really hit by the Duane girl? She's a thoroughbred, I admit, and I wish you luck, old man. But I never get a chance to see her. She lives way off in Ohio or somewhere, and she's just here for the wedding festivities." "Well, be expeditious. We'll go to the White Birches again before the wedding, and she'll probably be there. I'll ask Cousin Abby to ask her, if you like. And then at the time of the wedding we'll all be at the Duncan house, I suppose, for a day or two, at least. I'm to be old Justin's best man. I told him I didn't want to, but I suppose I will. Oh, pshaw, man, if you've got any enterprise at all, you can find some way to woo and win a fair lady, without having her thrown at your head. I think she's ready to meet you halfway, anyhow." Gale brightened up at this. But Crosby became more gloomy as he realized that Gale had a fair fighting chance while he had none. It was about 5:00 when they reached the station in Philadelphia. "What are you doing tonight?" asked Gale as they parted. "Dunno. Depends mostly on what letters and stuff I find waiting for me. We ought to get together and talk over that Herman case." "Yes. Where is that data I gave you to look over?" "It's in my duffel somewhere. I'll hunt it out when I get to the hotel." "All right. And you'd better drop in at the club tonight. I'm going to dine there, and then I'll tell you if I've had any word from Herman. There's lots of detail to be attended to in that case." "I'll call you up and let you know what I can do later. S'long, old man." They parted, and Crosby went directly to the hotel where he made his home. Gale had rooms in a bachelor apartment house, but Crosby declared that a big hotel was the only place where a man could get decent service and comfortable surroundings. He nodded affably to the desk clerk, took his mail, and went directly to an elevator and up to his rooms on the 3rd floor. He usually went up in the elevator, though, coming down, he oftener used the stairs. However, as his particular elevator boy did not suffer financially from this state of things, no complaint was made. Being expeditious by nature, and inherently opposed to what is known as "lost motion," he had run through his letters, and was ready for his dinner at 7:00. As nothing in his mail offered him any more attractive occupation for the evening, he thought of going to the club to see Gale, and he telephoned him to this effect before going on to the dining room.
Then, seated alone at his usual table, he opened the evening paper and was soon lost in its contents. A little before 8 o'clock he was called to the telephone and answered "Hello" to Gale's greeting. "Old chap," Gale said, "don't come over here tonight unless you choose. I've promised to make up a rubber with some fellows, and I'm going home early." "O.K.," returned Crosby. "I was half inclined to go to the orchestra concert, and I believe I will. Haggensdorfer is on the program, and I simply can't stay away. Want to drop in there later?" "No, I believe not. I'll play around here for a while and slide home early. See that you get around to the office in some decent time tomorrow morning, and bring that memo." "All right, I will. Good bye." "Good bye." And Gale hung up the receiver rather relieved than otherwise at Crosby's defection, for he had made up his mind to write to Leila Duane that evening, in pursuance of Crosby's suggestion that he should hasten his wooing. And a letter like that required time and concentration of thought. However, Gale returned to his rooms fairly early, and was getting ready to turn in for the night when, soon after 11 o'clock, his telephone rang. It was Crosby again, and he began his conversation with voluble praise of the concert. "Oh, let up," said Gale. "Tell me the rest in the morning. I'm off to bye-bye." "But hold on, Gale. That isn't all I wanted to say. I find I've left that memo at White Birch's. Had it there last night, looking over it. I had it with some papers in an old wallet, and left the whole business on the dresser in my bedroom." "Oh, hang it, Crosby, you do beat the dickens with your forgetfulness. How'm I ever going to make a lawyer out of you unless you get over your carelessness? Don't scold, Emery. I didn't go for to do it. And I say, I'll telephone to Driggs right away, and he'll send it right bang over here by registered mail and special delivery and all those things. You'd better wait till morning to telephone. They're probably having a party or something. And I suppose we can get along without that stuff tomorrow. But you do make me mad." "Yes, I know I do," responded Crosby cheerfully. "Guess I'll say good night before you get any madder." "Good night," replied Gale shortly. "Get around to the office on time tomorrow morning." He hung up the receiver with a jerk, for though he was fairly good-tempered, he did get tired of his partner's continual forgetfulness. But he allowed his thoughts to return to Leila Duane, and he soon forgot Crosby's deficiencies. And when Crosby turned up Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, fully 15 minutes ahead of time, full of apologies for his carelessness, Gale only said, "Never mind, old chap. Herman can wait a day or two more." "I telephoned Driggs this morning," said Crosby, "long about 8 o'clock. He said he'd whack it right over here. Good boy, Driggs." Did he say anything about Miss Duane pining away because of your absence?" "No, he didn't." "Oh, stuff," said Gale. "Chuck it, and get to work now that you're here." And then the two men really devoted their thoughts and efforts to the business at hand. 6. On a balcony. After Gale and Crosby had left White Birches, much of the life of the party seemed gone. Leila was plainly distrait. She had not failed to notice that Mr. Gale had evinced an interest in her attractive self, and she hated to have that interest cut off in its youth and beauty. As for Dorothy, she had only her fiancé and his secretary to flash her smiles at, and that was a beggarly portion of men for the unlimited number of smiles she had at her disposal. And so when Leila attempted to appropriate Ernest Chapin, Dorothy showed fight. After all, it was the old situation. Dorothy cared for Ernest Chapin, but he was poor. Justin Arnold was an old fogey, dictatorial, and a good deal of a bore, but he was rich. Perhaps Dorothy was neither more nor less mercenary than other girls, but she had made up her mind to marry Justin Arnold, and she had no intention of allowing her heart to interfere with her plans. This, however, did not prevent her from smiling at Chapin, and Dorothy's smiles were like fuel to a flame. And so fascinating was this game that Dorothy became more and more daring, more and more interested in Ernest Chapin, until finally her mother interfered. "Dorothy," she said straightforwardly, "you must stop flirting with Mr. Arnold's secretary. Not only is it bad form and beneath your dignity, But you are jeopardizing your whole future. Mr. Arnold won't stand it much longer." "How do you know, mother?" "I know from the way he looks at you when you're making those silly grimaces at Mr. Chapin." "I don't think they're silly grimaces." And Dorothy cast a casually admiring glance at herself in a mirror. "And Mr. Chapin doesn't either." "Indeed he doesn't. He's over head and ears in love with you, if that's any satisfaction to your foolish, vain little heart. Dorothy, I wish you had more dignity." "Now, mother, am I a dignified type?" What mother could help smiling fondly at this question, put by a dainty, saucy sprite to whom the word dignity could not possibly be applied? But she tried to hide her admiration, and said with would-be sternness, "You must try to achieve a little, my dear, if you're going to be Justin Arnold's wife." "I will be good, dear mother, I heard a sweet child say," sang Dorothy, with mischievous glances at her mother. "Honest and truly, black and bluely, I will be good, if I can." And then, with a parting kiss and a gentle little shake of her mother's shoulders, Dorothy ran away to dress for dinner. In a spirit of mischief she determined to be very demure that night. She put on a simple little white frock with knots of light green ribbon. She parted her hair, and brushing out its rebellious curls as much as possible, she drew it down over her ears, and into a loose knot at the nape of her neck, which had the effect of making her look like a very mischievous Saint Cecilia. She checked an impulse to dance downstairs, and walked down slowly, with her hands hanging crossed in front of her, and, as she had fully expected, she met Arnold in the hall. "Good heavens, Dorothy, what have you been doing to yourself?" "Don't you like me?" An angelic smile was on the face upturned to his, and the corners of the dimpled mouth drooped in saintly fashion. "Why, I don't know whether I do or not. What's it for? I never know what you're up to." "Oh, Justin, that's the trouble. You never know anything. Why don't you have any perception or understanding or what do you call it? Introspection?" "Introspection? There's no such word."
"Yes, there is. I just made it myself. It's a lovely word, and it means if you love a little girl, you ought to understand what she means, even when she doesn't mean anything."
"Dorothy," and Arnold looked at her not entirely with approbation, "I do believe there's nothing to you but frivolity."
Dorothy pouted. "You wouldn't say that if you loved me."
"Of course I love you, but I'm not of a demonstrative sort, so you needn't expect a foolish show of affection."
"I just love a show of foolish affection,"
murmured Dorothy, but Arnold went on unheeding. "And I'm 18 years older than you are, so you can't expect me to imitate your childish ways."
"Oh, do imitate them, Justin. You'd look so funny. By the way, Justin, did you ever love anyone else before you loved me?"
"Don't ask foolish questions, Dorothy."
"Then give me a sensible answer."
"Very well, I will. I see no reason for not telling you that I did love somebody else, years ago. But she didn't love me."
"I don't blame her much,"
said Dorothy, but she said it half under her breath, and Arnold, whose thoughts had flown backward, didn't hear her. And then the others joined them, and a few guests came, and the big hall became a scene of merry laughter and gay chatter. The hall was circular, and rooms rayed out from it in various directions. This plan allowed of many queer-shaped little rooms or alcoves between the larger apartments, and as, during the various improvement periods, some floors or ceilings had been raised and others lowered, the whole house was a delightful jumble of intricate and uncertain wanderings. Dorothy had discovered and appropriated for her own many of these "flirting corners," as she called them, but to-night she would have none of them. She stood demurely by Arnold's side until dinner was announced, and then walked with him straight to the dining room, though usually they had to institute a search for her at mealtimes. During dinner, and indeed all the evening, she kept up her role of demure quietness, and her mother looked at her approvingly, for she thought her admonitions had been heeded. Later in the evening, and after the dinner guests had gone, Arnold took Dorothy out for a little stroll around the grounds. The moonlight made the white birch trees even more silvery of bark and turned their foliage to black velvet. Deep down in the ravines could be seen silver lights on the black water, and the autumn wind murmuring in the trees gave an added touch of solemn grandeur. "It is a beautiful place," said Dorothy, a little thrilled as she stood on the south terrace and looked down into the dark tangles of the woodland. "But not very cheerful, is it, Justin?" "It is a magnificent place, Dorothy, but I feel you're incapable of appreciating it. You would probably prefer Italian formal gardens and great sweeps of sunny lawn, with gay-colored flower beds here and there." "Well, yes," said Dorothy, "I think that would be pretty. But it wouldn't fit white birches, would it, Justin?" "I should say not. I'm glad you can at least realize that. Why, Dorothy, this is perhaps the finest old place in this country. That stone wall is unique, and as for the great arched gateway, I doubt if many English parks can match it. We Arnolds appreciate the grandeur and dignity of our ancestral home, and I hope and trust, Dorothy, that you too will learn to do so." "Oh, Justin, you give me so much to learn. How can one little head hold it all?" "It doesn't seem much, dear, to expect you to love and reverence this old place, that means so much to me." "But it means such a lot to you, because you were born here and have always lived here. Now, I wasn't, and so you see, it's very different. My marrying you won't make me a born Arnold, you know." "You're a born darling," exclaimed Arnold, looking at her, as the moonlight came through the leaves and illuminated her exquisite face. "Do you love me, really?" and Dorothy's voice was wistful and sweet. "More than life itself. More than I ought to, a great deal." These phrases didn't at all please Miss Duncan's fastidious taste in such matters. The first was hackneyed and meaningless, and the second was grudging and not nice in its implication. However, she had an axe to grind, and she proposed to utilize the occasion. "How dear you are!" and her little fingers crept into his own. "I'm afraid I'm not good enough for you, Justin." A soft little sigh accompanied this mendacious speech. "Dorothy, my angel, you're too good for me. I'm not sure I ought to link your beautiful young life to mine. But I will try to make you happy, dearest." "Do you really desire my happiness?" Dorothy was in his arms now, her soft cheek against his, and her sweet voice very gentle and tender. "Yes, you shall have anything you want. Anything." "I don't want much, only I do want you to promise that we needn't stay here at White Birches all the year round." "Not stay here? Where would you stay?" "Why, don't you think it would be nice to go to the mountains and seashore in the summer time?" "But this is a perfect summer home, Dorothy." "Well, just for part of the time, you know. And then in winter it is so bleak and drear here, I thought we could take a house in the city for the coldest months." "Why, darling, it is glorious up here in winter. Such air, such bright crisp days, you wouldn't want to spend them in a smoky city." "Oh, the city isn't smoky, Justin. And then I hoped, you'd take me abroad every spring." "Every spring? Dear, you're crazy. I thought myself we'd go abroad sometime, but I'm very sure once will be enough for me." "Well, it won't for me. And you said I should have whatever I wanted." "Yes, in reason, dearest. But your talk is out of all reason." "And isn't your love for me out of all reason, too?" Dorothy's soft arm stole round his neck, and her lips met his. "No." And he unclasped her hands and put her a little away from him. "No, it is a true, strong, honest love, but it isn't unreasonable, nor does it ask of you such utter absurdities as you are asking of me. I think the moonlight has affected you. Let us go in now. It is growing chill." Dorothy had failed, and she was furious. But she controlled herself, determined not to show temper at Justin's attitude. She had amazed him, and she knew it, but it was the entering edge of a wedge which might be driven farther some other time. So she only said, "Yes, let us go in. It is dignified and all that, but somehow, Justin, it frightens me. The shadows are so weird, and those ghostly white trees shiver in the wind like spectres of the departed Arnolds. Do you suppose they're wagging their branches at me because they don't like me?"
"Nonsense, Dorothy. You're enough to give a man the creeps. Come on into the house."
As the ladies took up their bedroom candles and went upstairs, leaving the men to spend a half hour in the smoking room, Dorothy called down from the upper landing, "Don't forget to put on the burglar alarm, Justin. Somebody might come and carry me off."
It was characteristic of Arnold that he answered seriously, "I've never forgotten it yet, Dorothy," and ignored the latter part of her speech.
The burglar alarm was rather a standard joke among guests at White Birches, but this had never interfered with Justin Arnold's systematic observance of the old custom. Dorothy paused at Leila's room for a good-night gossip. She was still in a quiet mood, and Leila asked her frankly what was the matter. "Nothing," said Dorothy, with a little sigh. "I'm going to try to give a successful imitation of the dignity of the Arnolds for the rest of my life. I must learn to behave like an Arnold if I'm going to be one." "Perhaps," said Leila, daringly, "you'd rather see than be one." "No, not that," said Dorothy, thoughtfully. "Justin isn't very much to see, you know." "I think he's a very handsome man." "Oh, handsome nothing. He has a face like a hawk, a disposition like an iceberg, and not a bit of temper. I wish he had a temper."
"He'll probably develop one after he marries you."
"It won't be my fault if he doesn't. But he is an old duck, and I'm terribly fond of him. Now let's change the subject. How many letters have you had from Mr. Gale?" "What do you mean?" exclaimed Leila, blushing. "He only went away this noon. He's hardly in Philadelphia yet." "Oh, yes, he is. He reached there before 6 o'clock, and I've no doubt he spent the whole evening writing letters to you and tearing them up, in a vain endeavor to strike just the right note of friendliness. Dorothy, you're a goose, and I wish you'd go on to bed. I am going, dearie, because I know you want to write to Emery Gale."
Dodging the little white pillow that Leila threw at her, Dorothy flew out into the hall and made for her own room.
As she turned a corner of the dimly lit corridor, she felt herself suddenly grasped by a pair of strong arms, and drawn quickly between some heavy draped curtains and out onto a tiny balcony. "Shh!" whispered Ernest Chapin's voice close to her ear. "I've kidnapped you. You said someone might, so I thought I'd be the one." "Unhand me, villain," whispered Dorothy, giggling at the escapade. "I decline to be drawn behind the arras and carried to who knows what fearful fate."
"No more fearful fate than to look at the moon for 2 minutes.
It's marvelous from this balcony, shining on that little dark pool. Come and see." Not entirely unwilling, Dorothy let herself be led out onto the little balcony, and to do Chapin justice, the moonlight effect was quite all he had claimed for it. Dorothy knew perfectly well she ought not to be out there alone with Ernest Chapin, but a sort of reaction had followed her demure mood, and she murmured, "Just a minute, then. I won't give you but just exactly 1 minute."
"Then I shall make the most of it,"
said Chapin, quickly clasping her in his arms.
"Dorothy, my darling, I wouldn't do this, but I know you love me. You don't love Arnold. And oh, sweetheart, don't marry him. Don't sell yourself for the Arnold fortune. Come to me, dearest, for you know you love me."
The sweetness and nearness of Dorothy, and the maddening effect of the moonlight, had caused Chapin to lose all caution, and though low his deep tones were clear and distinct. A cold, hard voice followed his own.
"Oh, no, she doesn't love you, Chapin. You're awfully mistaken. She may be flirting with you. It's one of her bad habits. But she doesn't love you."
"I do," declared Dorothy, irritated by Arnold's calm statements and cutting manner.
"No, you don't, Dorothy. You're a little affected by the moonlight, But you're not in love with a man who is beneath you socially, and who, incidentally, is a coward and a traitor to the man who employs him."
"Stop!" cried Dorothy. "You shan't talk so about the man I love."
"You hear, Arnold?" said Chapin, with a laugh that was a little unsteady. He still held Dorothy in his arms, and as Arnold stepped out on the balcony the pair faced him. "Go to your room, Dorothy," said Arnold, quietly. "I will settle this matter with Mr. Chapin."
"I won't go, Justin, until I explain. It isn't Ernest's fault. I asked him to come out here."
Dorothy told her lie calmly, hoping to shield Chapin from the wrath she saw blazing in Arnold's eyes. "And since when have you called my secretary by his first name? That is more than I do myself."
"Perhaps he is more to me than he is to you."
Dorothy's voice shook, and she drew closer to Chapin, who held her close to him. "I can say nothing, Mr. Arnold," he said, and his tones were clear and strong. "I deserve your scorn and reproach. I have acted the part of a coward and a cad. My only excuse is that I love the same woman you do, and she—" "Yes," whispered Arnold, with dry lips, "and she—"
"I'll answer for myself," said Dorothy, suddenly. "I love you, Justin."
She left Chapin's side and nestled against Arnold. Her perfect face uplifted in the moonlight thrilled him, and he put his arm around her. Then as suddenly he withdrew it. "You don't," he cried. "You are only marrying me for my money. You are untrue, unfaithful, a shallow-hearted coquette. You never loved me. You have deceived me with your false smiles and kisses, and as soon as my back is turned you are caressing someone else. Our betrothal is ended. I cast you off. No Arnold has ever married a faithless woman. Go to your room. I will attend to this cur who has betrayed me." Ernest Chapin said slowly and clearly, "I will answer those remarks to you alone, Mr. Arnold." "Yes, I think you will," Justin Arnold replied. "Go to your room, Dorothy. I will discuss this little matter with you tomorrow."
"Good night, Justin," said the girl, in a small, scared voice. "Good night, Mr. Chapin."
Neither of the men replied, and Dorothy, dazed at the situation, walked slowly to her own room. End of chapters 5 and 6. Chapters 7 and 8 of The White Alley by Carolyn Wells. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 7. Missing. The next morning Leila Duane burst into Dorothy's room without the formality of knocking. "What's the matter?" asked Dorothy, fixing her large dark eyes on her friend's perturbed face. Dorothy's own face was not smiling. She looked a little pale, and seemed weary, as if she had passed a restless and wakeful night. Leila looked at her silently for a minute. "Dorothy," she began, "something strange has happened. At least, we don't know whether it's strange or not." "Well, do you know whether it's happened or not?" questioned Dorothy, rather satirically. Whereupon Leila sat down on the edge of the bed and began to cry. "Dorothy, don't be frivolous," she sobbed. "It may be something awful. They can't find Mr. Arnold."
"Can't find Justin? What do you mean? Where is he?"
"Why, we don't know. Nobody knows. Only he's gone."
"What nonsense, to get so excited over that. Justin's old enough to take care of himself. He's probably gone to New York to buy my wedding ring."
Leila got up to go away. "Dorothy," she said, "I advise you to stop talking like that, and I advise you to get dressed and come downstairs as soon as you can." Dorothy rang for the maid and proceeded to make a leisurely toilette. Though not given to questioning servants, she asked the girl what she knew about Mr. Arnold's absence.
"I don't know nothing, miss. I heard Peter say that Mr. Arnold wasn't in the house or on the place, but Driggsy told us all not to say a word to anybody, and anyhow, I don't know nothing about it, miss." "Never mind what Driggs told you. You tell me all you know."
Honest, miss, I don't know nothing." "Then why is there such an excitement because Mr. Arnold has gone away early somewhere? Has he never done such a thing before?" "I don't know, ma'am. I've not been here very long." "What has Driggs to do with it, anyway? It's not his business to look after Mr. Arnold's movements. Why did he tell you not to say a word to anybody?" "I don't know, miss, but he was that particular about it." "Well, you don't seem to know anything. Finish hooking my frock and let me go."
But before she left the room Dorothy made another attempt.
"Cora," she said coaxingly, "tell me what you know. I won't tell that you told me. I'm afraid to go downstairs." "Well, Peter said, but I'll be discharged if I tell you, Miss Duncan. Driggs said as how we should." "Nonsense!" and Dorothy stamped her foot. "I tell you I won't let any one know that you told me. Go on. What did Peter say?" "He said as how Mr. Arnold has been gone all night, because his bed hasn't been slept in."
Dorothy turned white and leaned against the wall for a moment. Then she went to the mirror, scrutinized herself carefully, and turned to the maid.
"Do you think I look queer, Cora?" "Not to say queer, miss, but sort o' peaked like." "Peaked? I don't know what that means."
And rubbing her cheeks and forcing a smile, Dorothy went slowly downstairs. She found everybody assembled in the living room, with Miss Abby Wadsworth, as usual, conducting affairs. Mrs. Duncan, with a very grave expression on her face, sat on a sofa, and made room for Dorothy by her side. The girl felt her mother's arm go round her, and she sat quietly listening with the others. "I can't understand it," Miss Abby was saying. "Peters, at what time did you go to Mr. Arnold's room this morning?" "Shortly after 9 o'clock, ma'am." "Why did you go?" "Well, ma'am, you see, Mr. Arnold always rings for me promptly at 8:30. And this morning he didn't ring, and I waited and waited until after 9, and then I made bold to go and tap at his door. I knocked 3 times and he didn't answer, so I ventured to try the door. It wasn't locked, and I went in. Mr. Arnold wasn't there, and his bed hadn't been slept in. The covers were folded just as I always turn them down for him every night. His clothes were not about, and there was no sign of anybody." "But this is very strange," pursued Miss Abby, quite as if it were Peter's fault. "Why should Mr. Arnold sit up all night?" "I don't know, ma'am. But if he did do that same, where is he now?" "He must be somewhere about the place," said Miss Abby decidedly. "Of course there is an explanation. He may have gone for a walk late last night and have fallen or met with some accident." "Excuse me, ma'am," said Driggs, "but he couldn't get out of the house." "Why couldn't he?" inquired Mrs. Duncan. "Because," explained Driggs, "Mr. Arnold always turns on the burglar alarm himself every night, and I turn it off every morning. When I look at it in the morning, ma'am, the indicator would show if it had been tampered with during the night." "Are you sure?" asked Mr. Crane, with interest. "Yes, sir. And if a window or door had been opened during the night while that there alarm was set, there'd have been a ringin' of electric bells all over this house, a makin' such a din as nobody could have slept through. No, sir, that alarm wasn't touched from the time Mr. Arnold put it on last night till I put it off this morning. And between them times there wasn't no door nor window opened or shut in this whole house. Therefore, I says Mr. Arnold must be in the house, because he couldn't get out." In his intense earnestness Driggs had almost forgotten his servility of manner, and looking straight at Mr. Crane spoke as man to man, in the face of a great mystery. Then he turned his gaze to Miss Wadsworth, and, though she was also mystified, she nodded her head in corroboration of Driggs' statements, and his conclusion therefrom. "It is so," she said. "Justin has often explained to me how perfectly the alarm works, and how impossible it is to open an outside door or a window without starting the bells to ringing." "Might it not be temporarily out of order?" suggested Mr. Crane, who had constituted himself Miss Abby's right-hand man and chief adviser. "It never has been, sir," volunteered Driggs, "since I've been here, and that's nigh on to 40 years. I come here a young man when Mr. Justin was a baby,
and his father was a crank, if I may say it, about burglars. He had all the wiring done and the alarm put in his day. And following his orders, Mr. Justin has kept the thing up, and has added a good many contraptions as fast as they were invented. No, sir, wherever my master may be, and whatever his reason for hiding, he's in this house. 'Cause why? 'Cause he couldn't get out without either turning off that alarm or raising a clatter, and neither of those things was done." "Then he must be in the house," said Mr. Crane. "This is a large and rambling structure. May he not have gone into some one of the smaller rooms, and perhaps suffered from some kind of a seizure or stroke?" "Good gracious!" exclaimed Miss Abby. "Do you mean that Justin may be alone and unconscious, perhaps suffering, under this very roof?" "I only mean that it might be so." "Then let us have a thorough search made," said Miss Abby excitedly. "Peters, you know which rooms Mr. Arnold would be likely to go into. Go and search them all at once. Take some of the other servants to help you. Go all over the house, into every nook and cranny." Peters departed, though the expression on his face showed that he hardly thought this solution of the mystery probable. "It isn't like Mr. Arnold," began Ernest Chapin, speaking slowly, "to go into any unused room so late at night. As you know, Miss Wadsworth, Mr. Arnold is most systematic in his habits. After turning on the alarm, he invariably goes directly to his room and to bed." "That is so," agreed Miss Abby. "But as we have to face an unusual state of things, we must admit that Justin departed from his regular systematic procedure, and we must assume an unusual occurrence of some sort." "But it all seems so ridiculous," spoke up Dorothy. "I'm sure Justin has only gone out for a walk or a ride, and will bob in at any minute. He might have started out after Driggs took off the alarm." "But his bed has not been slept in," Miss Abby reminded her. "Peters says he thinks Justin did not go to his room at all, as his brushes and things have not been touched since Peters arranged them for the night." "There seems to be nothing the matter except that Justin didn't sleep in his own room," said Dorothy. "I don't think that's anything to make such a fuss about. He must have gone to New York, or somewhere late last night, after the rest of us had all gone upstairs. Then, as he knew he couldn't get in this house during the night, he stayed in New York, and will come home on an early train." Mabel Crane looked at Dorothy steadily. At first the girl did not see her, then when she became aware of the close observation, she flushed crimson and buried her face in her mother's shoulder. "Who saw him last?" inquired Fred Crane suddenly. Dorothy lifted her head and stared at the speaker. Then she glanced round the room. Everybody was looking at Crane as if waiting for him to answer his own question. 8. The Search. "Why, I don't know," said Miss Wadsworth at last. "It must have been some of the servants, I suppose. Let me see. We ladies all went upstairs about midnight, and I suppose you men went to the smoking room. Didn't you, Mr. Crane?" "Yes, and we stayed there, I should think, some 15 or 20 minutes. There were only Arnold, Mr. Chapin, and myself. The night before, Gale and Crosby were here, and we had a merrier time. But last night we weren't very gay, and I went upstairs, I should say, about 12:30. "That's right," said Mr. Chapin. "We went upstairs at 12:30. When I left Mr. Arnold, he said he would make his tour of inspection of the house, as he always did, set the alarm, and then turn in. He must have done this, for he came upstairs not more than 10 minutes after I did." As Ernest Chapin said all this, in a slow, clear, and careful voice, he looked straight at Dorothy. The girl understood perfectly that he intended to say nothing of the scene on the little balcony, or of Mr. Arnold's appearance. She realized that he was doing this to screen her from possible unkind criticisms, for while Justin Arnold's whereabouts remained a mystery, it would be unpleasant to have a lovers' quarrel affect the question. Dorothy was grateful to Mr. Chapin for this consideration, and as of course it was assumed that all the ladies had gone straight to their rooms and stayed there, no further questions were asked about it. But now that it was acknowledged that the disappearance was a mystery,
Everyone began to feel a vague uneasiness that was appalling because of its very vagueness. The facts were so few and so contradictory. Justin Arnold was missing. He could not get out of the house, and yet he was not in the house. That was the case in a nutshell. Peters returned from his search of the rooms and announced that there was no sign of the missing man, and no sign of anything unusual or strange in any room. "When did you see Mr. Arnold last, Peters?" inquired Mr. Crane of the valet. "When I laid out his dinner clothes, sir, or rather when I attended him as he dressed for dinner." "He seemed the same as usual?" "Just the same, sir. I've been with Mr. Arnold for nearly 10 years, and he's always been the same. A kind master, but not given to talking to his servants." "As indeed, why should he? But some masters chat a bit now and then. After Mr. Arnold went down to dinner, I put his things in order, turned down his bed, and laid out his night things, and that always ends my duties for the day. Mr. Arnold never requires me when he goes to bed. He says it only bothers him to have me about then. So my evenings are my own." "And when do you go to Mr. Arnold's room of a morning?" Mr. Crane had taken upon himself the right to institute this investigation, and asked his questions with the air of one in charge of a case. "I never go, sir, until Mr. Arnold rings," Peters answered. "But he always rings for me at 8:30. This morning he didn't, and as it was the first time such a thing had ever happened, I was surprised. I waited and waited, and then something after 9 o'clock I went to his room, and found he hadn't been there all night." "He may have been there," objected Mr. Crane. "Well, sir, if he was, he left no trace. Not a brush was touched, or anything on his dresser, or in his bedroom or bathroom. Of course he may have been in the room and gone away again, but he didn't sleep there last night. And," Peters paused impressively, "he isn't in the house now, sir. I'll swear to that. I took 2 of the footmen, sir, and we've scoured the whole house, and there's no sign of Mr. Arnold anywhere." "Of course there isn't," exclaimed Dorothy. "He wouldn't go and hide in some cupboard, and if he had a stroke of apoplexy or anything, he couldn't have disappeared after it. I tell you he went out for some perfectly sensible reason, and he'll come back when he gets ready. I don't care anything about your burglar alarm. If it's so clever and ingenious, he probably had some equally clever way to turn it off and on as he chose." "But, Miss Duncan," said Driggs respectfully, "besides the burglar alarm, every door and window is fastened on the inside. The doors have heavy bolts and chains, and the windows have patent fastenings. These were all intact this morning when I came downstairs." "All but one, Driggs," said Dorothy, smiling. "The one Mr. Arnold went out at couldn't have been fastened this morning, although you think it was." Driggs said nothing, but looked unconvinced, and Mr. Crane suggested, "He has so many clever mechanical contrivances, perhaps he could open a door or window and then fasten it behind him." "But there'd be no sense to it," said Ernest Chapin impatiently. "Why should a man like Mr. Arnold leave his house secretly in the dead of night? As his secretary, I am conversant with his business affairs, and there is nothing among those that could call him away on a secret errand. And if he had a secret errand he was at liberty to go and attend to it, unquestioned in broad daylight." "What, then, do you think is the solution of this mystery?" asked Mr. Crane. "I don't know," replied Chapin. "It seems to me that he must be in the house, although, of course, Peters has made a thorough search." "He can't be in the house," declared Miss Abby. "I don't care anything about thorough searching. If Justin were in the house, he'd be in some one of the rooms where he reasonably belongs. He went out of the house. That's what he did." Every time this opinion was expressed, Driggs seemed to consider it an imputation against his own fidelity and veracity. His long period of service had given him certain privileges above those of an ordinary butler, and he allowed himself to volunteer a remark. "Miss Wadsworth," he began, "may I say that if Mr. Arnold did get out of this house, which he couldn't do unbeknownst, the watchman must have seen him do so. Would you, ma'am, call Maloney and ask him?" Glad of the new suggestion, Miss Wadsworth ordered that Maloney be summoned at once.
The big Irishman appeared, and at a nod from Miss Abby, Mr. Crane questioned him. "You are the night watchman on the estate?" "Yes, sir. I'm Maloney, the night watchman. I've patrolled these grounds every night for many years." "Do you walk all around the place, systematically?" "I do that. It's me duty to punch the time clocks every half hour." "And where are the time clocks?" "Well, sir, there's one at the gatekeeper's lodge, one at the stables, one at each of the four sides of the house, and the four corners of the grounds. Between them all, I'm all over the grounds all the time, and nobody, least of all the master, would be strolling around without me knowing of it." "But if he had left the house, Maloney, when you were in a distant corner of the grounds, you might not have seen him." "Thrue for ye, sir. But thin, by the same token, I'd run across him sooner or later in me trips, for he couldn't get out of the grounds. The big gate is locked and barred so strong that it would take a battering ram to break it down. And this mornin' every one of them bolts and bars was just as they should be. So I puts it to you, sir. Could any man get out of the gate and bolt and bar it behind him? He could not. And could he get over the wall, you'll say? He could not. The wall is 10 feet high, and the top of it is decorated with the finest collection of broken bottles to be found in the country. Their pints stick up as jagged and sharp as so many sword blades, and if any man could manage to climb over that wall, he'd be in ribbons when he come down on the other side. Would Mr. Arnold do that? He would not. And so it's plain, sir, that Mr. Arnold did not come out of his house, which he couldn't get out of, and did not perude about his grounds, because, forby, he isn't there." Maloney's voice at the last dropped to a mysterious and meaningful whisper, so that Crane was moved to inquire, "What do you mean by saying so emphatically that Mr. Arnold is nowhere on the grounds?" "Because I searched it everywhere. Me and 2 of the gardeners and some of the stable boys have been scouring the grounds ever since we heard Mr. Arnold was missin', and though we've looked in every ravine and holler, he just ain't there." Mr. Crane rather prided himself on his detective instinct, and he caught at what he considered a point. "If Mr. Arnold couldn't get out of the house, Maloney, why did you go to the trouble of making such a thorough search of the grounds?" Maloney's honest face looked grave. "Perhaps it was reasonless, sir," he said, "but them grounds is my special charge at night. And though Mr. Arnold couldn't get out of the house without Driggs knowing it, yet I thought it was up to me to make sure that he wasn't in the grounds, in case I should be asked the question." To more than one mind present this was a slight indication of a possible complicity on the part of Driggs. The only evidence that the burglar alarm had not been switched off and on again while Arnold went out was Driggs' word to that effect. But closely allied to that came the thought that if Driggs were not telling the truth, Maloney might be equally mendacious. However, there was no real reason to suspect these old servants. For years they had been trusty and true, and any hypothesis leading toward an idea that they connived or had assisted Justin Arnold's secret departure from his own home was too melodramatic and absurd to be considered for a moment. The servants were dismissed, and the little group in the library looked at one another blankly, while considering what to do next. "Of course, only 2 things are possible," declared Fred Crane, emphasizing his statement by pounding his right fist into his left palm. "What are they?" said his wife, as he seemed to be awaiting the question. "One is," and again came the emphatic pound, "that Arnold is on some perfectly plausible and natural errand somewhere." "Which of course he is," interrupted Dorothy, her eyes blazing as she spoke. "Or else," went on Crane, "those 2 men servants know where he is." "Which 2?" said Chapin. "Driggs and Maloney. Yes, and I will include Peters. If any harm has come to Arnold, those men are responsible. For it is clear on the face of it, Arnold couldn't leave the house or grounds without their knowledge. And he has left, that is also clear. Now the only question is, why did he leave, and where is he?" "And I hold that it is none of our business," said Chapin. "If Mr. Arnold chooses to go away without announcing his intention, he has surely a right to do so. And if for any reason he wanted to preserve secrecy, and for that end took his servants into his confidence, That, too, is not our affair. For my part, I refuse to consider the matter a mystery, unless he remains away an unreasonable length of time."
"I think you're wrong, Mr. Chapin," said Mabel Crane. "I'm sure Peters was absolutely honest in his surprise at not finding his master in his room, and I am equally sure that the other two men are not playing a part." "Yet what other conclusion can we come to?" said Chapin a little testily.
"Have you anything else to offer?" "Personally, I am not at all sure that the servants connived at Mr. Arnold's departure. But it doesn't matter. Mr. Arnold is not here, it is for us to await his return, but not to speculate as to his whereabouts."
"I agree with you, Mabel," said Leila Duane, who had kept silence while the others had discussed the matter. "I think anyone could see at a glance that those servants spoke the truth. If Mr. Arnold had gone away secretly, and told them not to tell, it would have been because of some joke or little surprise for us, and the servants would have been mysterious, or enigmatical, but indifferent. Those men were scared. That's what they were. Scared. Now I tell you something has happened to Mr. Arnold, and we ought to investigate at once. And even if I am wrong, no harm can come of it."
Fred Crane looked at her. "Sensibly spoken, Leila," he said. "But how shall we go about an investigation? What can we do, more than has been done?"
"Nothing has been done. To ask 2 or 3 servants to look over the place is not investigating. Some one must take the lead, but surely I am not the one to do it."
As head of the house in Arnold's absence, Miss Wadsworth was looked to for directions or suggestions. But the poor lady had no suggestions to offer. Ernest Chapin, as confidential secretary of the missing man, seemed next in authority, but, like Miss Abby, he was agitated and unnerved at the situation. Most of the time he sat with head bowed, as if deeply depressed, and when spoken to he looked up with a start, and his face expressed a horror of uncertainty that seemed to add a deeper tone to the tragedy, if tragedy there were. Dorothy Duncan persisted in treating the matter lightly.
"I know Justin better than any of you," she said, "and I know just what he would do and what he would not do. And I know that he would not do any of the absurd things that you people seem to think he has done. He would not sneak out of his house at night, either with or without the assistance of his servants, knowing that it would throw all of us into this state of wonder and dismay. He would be too considerate of Miss Wadsworth and of myself to do such a thing."
End of chapters 7 and 8. Chapters 9 and 10 of The White Alley by Carolyn Wells. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 9. Not found. "Then where is he?" spoke up Fred Crane crisply.
"I don't know where he is, but I know he is on some perfectly plausible and commonplace errand. He has probably been delayed, but he will return shortly, and as soon as he possibly can."
Fred Crane was a little disconcerted at this rational way of looking at the matter, for already he had pictured himself doing clever detective work in what gave promise of being a mystery, if not a tragedy. Somewhat reassured by Dorothy's practical remarks, Miss Wadsworth began to reason. "I really agree with you, Dorothy," she said. "Or rather, I should do so if I did not know far better than you do, my child, about the positive efficiency of the burglar alarm. Why, once I went downstairs one hot summer night, and unfastened and opened a library window. Scores of electric bells whirred all over the house, and the servants seemed fairly to spring up out of the floor, they collected so rapidly. I think with you that Justin did get out somehow, but not unless that alarm had been turned off." Fred Crane put on his thinking cap at this. Could it be that Miss Wadsworth suspected Driggs' veracity? But he hardly dared even hint at this, so he rather cleverly made another suggestion. "As so much seems to hinge on the evidence of that burglar alarm," he said, "why not send for an electrical expert of the right sort and let him examine it?" "That is a fine idea!" exclaimed Miss Abby, who had really been forced to let a suspicion of Driggs creep into her mind, though she fought against it. "And if I may make a suggestion," said Mrs. Duncan in her quiet way, I propose that we send for Mr. Arnold's physician. I can't help thinking that Justin may have had a stroke of some sort, and be unconscious and helpless even now. His doctor could tell us if he were subject to anything of the sort." "I know he isn't subject to anything of the sort," said Miss Abby thoughtfully. "But I think yours is a good idea, Mrs. Duncan. We will send for Dr. Gaspard, and at least he can tell us if he ever feared anything like that for Justin. Let us also send for an electrical expert, or whoever it is that examines complicated machinery. Who would such a man be? Do you know Mr. Chapin?" Ernest Chapin looked up with a start. "Why, yes, yes," he said, as if striving confusedly to bring his mind to bear on the question. I think, Miss Wadsworth, we might send direct to the firm who put the alarm in, and ask them to send us a capable man for the purpose." "Yes, do so," cried Fred Crane. "Let us telephone for him. We must make search for Arnold, and we cannot do so intelligently until we understand more about the working of that alarm. I'm sorry, but I cannot believe with Miss Duncan that Arnold has gone off casually and will soon return. I think the mystery is deeper than that, and I think, too, it is exceedingly wise to call in the family physician. There are other things than strokes or seizures that work harm to a man." Then Mabel Crane spoke out, voicing the thought that had been secretly in the mind of everyone. "Oh, Fred," she cried almost hysterically, "you don't mean suicide?" "Hush, hush, Mabel," admonished her husband. "We've no reason to think of such a thing. Justin was happy and on the eve of his marriage to the girl he loved. Why should he dream of self-destruction just now, of all times?" It had been in Mr. Crane's mind, but when his wife put it into words the idea seemed so impossible that he repudiated it at once. But by a sudden mutual impulse Dorothy and Ernest Chapin looked at each other for the briefest moment, and then looked away again. Mabel Crane intercepted the glance, and they both saw her. Dorothy flushed scarlet, but Chapin turned white. Then, apparently with an effort, he drew himself together, and taking some letters from his pocket he began to look them over. Miss Wadsworth responded to Mabel's suggestion. "No," she said very decidedly, "the Arnolds do not commit suicide. Of course there is no reason why Justin should do so, but if there were 1,000 reasons for it, he would not do it. I know him well, and a stronger, braver, truer man does not live. You know this, Dorothy?" Yes," stammered the girl. "Yes, Miss Abby, of course I know it. Justin is a splendid man, a fine man." And then, bursting into tears, she again hid her face in her mother's arms. "I don't see, Dorothy," said Mabel Crane, "if you are so positive nothing has happened to Justin, why you are so overcome." "And I don't see why it should interest you," said Dorothy, sitting upright, looking at Mrs. Crane almost angrily. "Of course I know Justin is all right, but you all drive me crazy with your talk about suicide and 'something happening.' I don't wonder I'm upset. You would be, too, if people were looking at you and then looking at each other, and then nodding their heads as if " "As if what?" demanded Mrs. Crane, with spirit. But Dorothy's anger faded. "Nothing, Mabel. Don't mind me. I don't know what I'm saying." "Then you'd better not say anything." And Mabel Crane looked sternly at her. At this juncture Driggs returned to the library, and, going to Miss Wadsworth, showed her a somewhat worn brown leather pocket-book. "It's Mr. Crosby's, ma'am," said Driggs. "He left it in his bedroom, ma'am, when he went away yesterday. And he telephoned me this morning, ma'am, from Philadelphia, as how it contained valuable papers, and would I ask Mr. Arnold to send it to him at once, by registered mail. That would be about 8 o'clock, ma'am, that he telephoned, and I told him I would tell Mr. Arnold. And then, ma'am, in the excitement I forgot all about the matter until just now. Will you send it to him, ma'am? Or will Mr. Chapin—" "Certainly," replied Miss Abby, taking the pocket-book and handing it to Ernest Chapin. "Please attend to it, Mr. Chapin, and get it off as soon as possible. The delay may trouble Mr. Crosby." "Certainly,"
said Ernest Chapin, taking the wallet. But he sat fumbling with it absent-mindedly, as if his thoughts were far away.
"There's another thing," said Leila Duane. "As Mr. Crosby and Mr. Gale are Mr. Arnold's lawyers, perhaps they may know something about him. Perhaps he went to Philadelphia to see them."
"He didn't go to Philadelphia," said Fred Crane, a little weary of the reiteration, "because he couldn't get out to go anywhere. But I think Gale and Crosby ought to be notified about what has happened."
"There hasn't anything happened," insisted Dorothy. "At least, nothing that ought not to happen. But I do believe that Justin did go to New York to see a lawyer. Don't tell me he couldn't get out. He must have gotten out. And there's just where he's gone. He told me he wanted a will made, and he didn't want Mr. Crosby or Mr. Gale to draw it up."
"Why not?" asked Fred Crane in astonishment. "They're his lawyers."
"Yes, I know. But you see, he wanted to leave Mr. Crosby quite a sum of money, and he didn't want to leave Mr. Gale anything. You know Mr. Crosby is related to him, and Mr. Gale isn't. Well, anyway, he said it would be less personally embarrassing to go to some other lawyer. He spoke of someone in New York. I forget the name."
"I never heard of such nonsense," declared Crane. "Gale couldn't expect anything, and of course Crosby would."
"Justin was always sensitive about such matters," said Miss Abby. "It's just like him." "Well, whether it's like him or not," said Dorothy, "it's what he told me he was going to do. I suppose he has a right to do as he chooses in such matters."
"Of course, child," said Crane. "Don't flare up over it. No one is blaming you. But, granting all that, why would a man go off in the middle of the night to get a will made? It's preposterous."
"But what isn't preposterous as a solution of his disappearance?" said Leila. "I'm sure that's what he did do," persisted Dorothy. "He took a notion to go to New York, and he went."
"Well, I advise notifying Mr. Gale and Mr. Crosby of the situation," said Crane. "I, for one, don't feel satisfied to sit and do nothing. I may be mistaken, but I think we ought to stir around a little. And perhaps Arnold has gone to Philadelphia to see his lawyers there."
"That's too ridiculous," said Dorothy. "Why would he do that, when they were just here yesterday?"
But she flushed as she spoke, and her lip trembled. Then she tossed her head defiantly, and said,
"Do whatever you like. I'm sure I've no objections to any investigation, as you call it."
"Doing anything is better than doing nothing," declared Miss Abby. "Mr. Crane and Mr. Chapin, I wish you would do all the telephoning, please. Get the electrical man and the doctor, and then get a long distance to Philadelphia and see if Mr. Gale knows anything about Justin." "Better get Gale first," said Mr. Crane. "If Arnold is there, there's no use of getting in experts of any sort." "That's so," agreed Ernest Chapin, and the two men went away to telephone.
"I shall hunt for a note," said Dorothy, jumping up. "Come on, Leila, let's see if we can't find one, and get ahead of all these smart people."
But their search was unsuccessful. Though they looked in probable and improbable places, no missive was found explaining the mysterious absence of the man of the house. Imbued with the spirit of search, the girls wandered through the old mansion, peering into many unused rooms, poking into dark closets and cupboards, and even going up into some of the dusty old attics.
"Perhaps, like that Geneva lady, he hid in an old oak chest, and the cover snapped shut and he couldn't get out,"
suggested Leila, as she lifted the lid of a dusty old chest, that looked as if it had been undisturbed for years.
"Don't you remember, Dorothy, how the girl did that on her wedding eve, and they never found her for years afterward?" "Oh, Leila, don't say such dreadful things!" exclaimed Dorothy, shuddering. "Why, you needn't care. You think he's just gone out for a walk or something. I think something dreadful has happened to him." "What thing dreadful could happen to him?"
And Dorothy sank limply down on a dusty old hair trunk, for the forlorn and lonely dark attic with its blackened beams and dark cobwebby corners got on her nerves.
"Come on, Leila, let's go downstairs, for pity's sake."
And Dorothy made a rush for the staircase, catching Leila's hand and dragging her along with her.
"What's the matter, Dorothy? Did you see a ghost?"
But this ill-timed suggestion only added to Dorothy's terror, and she flew downstairs to the bright, beautiful library, and nestled close to her mother's side on the sofa where Mrs. Duncan was still sitting. "Have you heard from Mr. Crosby?" Dorothy asked, breathlessly. "Or Mr. Gale?" supplemented Leila, and then, fearful lest she might be thought to show too much personal interest, she added, "He's the senior member of the firm, isn't he?" This ruse deceived nobody, for all present knew that Leila and Mr. Gale were more than interested in each other. Mr. Crane answered both girls by saying, "Yes, we reached them by telephone. I talked with Mr. Gale, and he said they had seen or heard nothing of Arnold. He thinks the situation most extraordinary, and he says they will both come here at once, as he thinks such a course advisable." "I'm glad of it," said Dorothy, "if they can help us in any way. But I don't think we shall ever see Justin again." "How silly you are, dearie," said her mother. "Of course we shall see him again, and I hope soon." "When will Mr. Gale and Mr. Crosby arrive?" asked Leila, for she was already considering in what gown she would better array herself. "Gale said they'd leave on the 3 o'clock express. They can't get here much before 7, just in good time for dinner," said Mr. Crane, who had now definitely assumed the dictatorship. He was partly pushed into this position by Ernest Chapin's inability to pull himself together enough to be of any use. Indeed, the young secretary almost acted as if tragedy had already befallen, instead of merely an unspoken dread of it. He looked about with a vacant stare. When spoken to, he started suddenly, and then replied at random. His eyes looked frightened and vacant at the same time. He begged Mr. Crane to do the required telephoning, for he said he really didn't feel up to it. "Don't take it so hard, Chapin," Fred Crane had responded. "I don't think anything untoward has happened to old Justin. But if that should be the case, it can't affect you as deeply as it would Dorothy and Miss Wadsworth. So brace up and do what you can to help." 10. Dorothy's Promise. But though the men from Philadelphia could not reach White Birches until 7 o'clock, the doctor and the electrical engineer arrived during the afternoon hours. Their information proved of no help in solving the mystery, but rather deepened it. After a thorough and careful examination of the burglar alarm and all its attachments, annunciators and indicators, the electrical expert pronounced it the most marvelous affair of its kind he had ever seen. He said that it was in perfect order, and that owing to its wonderful and ingenious mechanism, it was positively impossible that anyone should have gone out of the house between 12:30 a.m., when it was turned on, and 7:30 a.m., when Driggs had turned it off. The man staked his entire reputation as an electrical expert on the positiveness of this statement. After which there was of course nothing to do but to theorize that Justin Arnold was still under his own roof, although this seemed equally impossible. As to Dr. Gaspard, he simply pooh-poohed any suggestion that there was any flaw in Arnold's physical constitution or mental equipment. While he said a stroke of apoplexy or paralysis might happen to anyone, yet some were far more liable to it than others, and Justin Arnold was the farthest possible removed from the type of constitution that would indicate that sort of thing. He, too, was willing to stake his professional reputation that whatever had happened to Arnold, if anything, was not a physical seizure of any kind. Nor was it any variety of mental derangement. Justin Arnold's brain was not of a sort to give way in an emergency, or under mental pressure of any kind. And, moreover, no emergency or mental pressure had transpired that would even hint at such a condition. "He is one of the soundest-minded men I know," concluded Dr. Gaspard, "and while I agree with you all that it is most mysterious, yet I must suspect the fallibility of a perfect machine before I can admit a hypothesis implying sudden dementia on the part of Justin Arnold." "And that's where it stands," said Fred Crane thoughtfully. "Either Arnold's strong, well-balanced brain gave way, or else his infallible burglar device did. Both these things are pronounced impossible by experts. So what is there left to think?" As the electrical expert was still present, he looked upon this speech as a direct implication that he had misunderstood or misrepresented the infallibility of the burglar alarm. Being of a somewhat choleric nature, he chose to take offence at this, and remarked heatedly that for his part he would sooner suspect the strongest mind in the strongest body in the world than the fallibility of a perfect machine. "And a perfect machine it is," he went on earnestly. "You ladies and gentlemen who are unacquainted with the real working of such a marvellous piece of ingenuity cannot expect to understand how wonderful and beautiful its various perfections are. But you may take my word for it, as an experienced electrician, there never has been anything finer made of its kind. And you may be convinced that it is a physical impossibility for Mr. Arnold to have left this house secretly while that alarm was on." The old doctor sniffed, and the young electrician glared back at him. Mr. Crane strove to reconcile the irreconcilable by saying, "Then we must conclude that since Arnold was sane and in his right mind, and since he could not get out of this house, then he must still be in the house, and that of his own knowledge and volition he is hiding himself from us. We have searched the house thoroughly, but I suppose there is a possibility of some secret passage or hiding place where he might be hidden, though I can conceive of no reason for such an act." Old Dr. Gaspard rose stiffly. "I cannot acquaint you with Mr. Arnold's reasons for what seems to be an eccentric performance, but I can assure you that whatever Mr. Arnold is doing he knows perfectly well why he is doing it. As I assume I cannot help you further in what must necessarily now become a search for the missing man, I will ask you to excuse me." With a disdainful glance at the electrician whom he considered his rival in the mere question of expert evidence, Dr. Gaspard made his adieux, and went away. The electrician, concluding that his usefulness was also at an end, followed, and the members of the household were again left to confront the ever-deepening mystery of the disappearance of Justin Arnold. Though appalled by the situation, Fred Crane was taking a lively interest in this opportunity to test his detective powers, and though he had as yet accomplished nothing positively, yet he had the negative evidence of the two experts who had been called in to work upon. "It's just this way," he said. "Arnold must be somewhere. He couldn't get out of the house, so he must be in the house. We've not been able to find him, so we are forced to the conclusion there is some kind of secret passage by which he has access to the outer world. This is not an unprecedented case. In many old houses like this there are secret and subterranean passages unsuspected by chance observers." "But not in this country," remarked Mrs. Duncan. "I've never heard of such things over here." "But there is no other explanation, Mrs. Duncan," went on Crane earnestly. "The process of elimination leaves that the only possible explanation of Justin's disappearance. He couldn't go up a chimney. He didn't go out of any door or window, and since he's not in the house he must have left by some secret passage. Do you not agree with me?" "I suppose so," said Mrs. Duncan, agreeing only because she had no other possibility to suggest. "Well, if that's true," put in Mabel, "I'll find that secret passage. If there's one in this house, I'll find it. If there's anything in this secret passage idea, then it must be that Justin went through his secret door and the lock sprung or something, and he couldn't get back. But he isn't hiding on purpose, and if he's walled up anywhere I'll get him out, if I have to pull the walls down." "Don't go pulling the walls down, Mabel," said her husband. "When Mr. Crosby comes he can tell us if there's any secret passage. I've often heard him say that he knows every nook and cranny of the whole place." "Yes, he does," said Miss Abby. "As a child he was always rummaging around in the attics and cellars, and if there's any subterranean passage he'll know of it." "Then there's nothing to do but to wait until Mr. Crosby comes," said Ernest Chapin thoughtfully. "But it seems awful to do nothing," said Fred Crane. "Suppose we telephone for a detective." "Oh, mercy, no!" exclaimed Miss Abby. "I have a perfect horror of detectives. Do let us wait until Mr. Crosby and Mr. Gale come. I'm sure they can do something." "I'm sure I don't know what they can do more than we can," declared Mr. Crane, who felt his own services unappreciated. "Come, Mabel, let us go for a walk through the grounds. We may find something by way of a clue." The party dispersed, only to congregate again in small groups here and there to discuss the mystery. Ernest Chapin asked Dorothy to go out on the south terrace with him for a little chat, and after a moment's hesitation the girl complied. They found themselves alone on the terrace, and Dorothy said, "You don't think, do you, Mr. Chapin, that Justin's absence has anything to do with last night's scene?" "What scene do you mean?" said Chapin, looking exceedingly perturbed. "Why, the scene he made when he found you and me out on the little balcony looking at the moon." "I wasn't looking at the moon," said Chapin, and he turned away his eyes as he added in a low voice, "I was looking at you." "Never mind what you were looking at," said Dorothy, blushing a little. "He spied us while you were looking. And I'm asking you if you think that circumstance had anything to do with his disappearance." "How could it?" demanded Chapin, savagely. "Do you suppose he went off and hanged himself because he saw me kiss you?" And then he added bitterly, "I only wish he had." "Oh, Mr. Chapin, how can you talk like that?" And Dorothy turned her lovely, frightened face toward him. "Forgive me, Dorothy. I oughtn't to have spoken like that. I don't know what I'm saying. This thing has unnerved me." "Then you, too, think something awful has happened to Justin?" "I don't see how anything could happen to him, but I can't believe in a casual explanation of his absence. Can you?" "No. If he were away on some errand he would send word to me somehow. He wouldn't leave me in suspense all this time." "Unless he is angry with you," suggested Chapin. "Well, if he is, Mr. Chapin, it's all your fault." And Dorothy's eyes blazed with indignation. "Then I'm glad of it," said Chapin, exultantly. "If he's angry at you because he saw us together last night and has gone away for that reason, I'm glad of it. And the longer he stays away the better I'll like it." This speech did not seem to rouse Dorothy's ire as it should have done. Looking at Chapin gravely, she said, "What did Justin say to you last night after I left you?" For a long time Chapin did not reply, and then when the silence had become almost unbearable he answered, "Nothing of any importance. And, Dorothy, be advised by me in this matter. Never mention to any living soul that you and I were on the balcony last night, or that Arnold discovered us there. Will you promise me this?" "Why?" And Dorothy's face looked troubled. "It may have been imprudent, but it wasn't a crime." Chapin regarded her gravely. "Dorothy, dearest, I am very much in earnest. You must not, you shall not tell anyone of that episode. I forbid it." "I am not accustomed to being forbidden." "Then I beg it, I implore that you will give me your promise. Do, Dorothy, do." The man's intensity of appeal startled her. "Why?" she asked again. "Never mind why. This mystery of Mr. Arnold's disappearance is not to be cleared up in a moment. And in his absence I am going to take care of you." "What do you mean?" And Dorothy's eyes were big and frightened. "Don't ask me what I mean. Just promise what I ask." "Yes, I promise." She spoke in a whisper, as if hypnotized by Chapin's dominant personality. "Indeed, I have no wish to tell anyone of that scene. I meant to tell Justin this morning that such a thing should never happen again." "But it shall happen again," said Chapin, and though he spoke in low tones his voice had an exultant ring in it that startled Dorothy. "What do you mean by that?" she breathed. "I mean what I say. I told you last night you should never marry Arnold, and you shan't. You are mine, mine, and whether Arnold returns or not, you shall never marry him, but you shall marry me. Because, Dorothy, because you love me." Disregarding the